pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you to all for coming. For Shy, for roll call with Shy David. Oh, is there any adjustments to the agenda?
Maybe or maybe not. I had a really long conversation with Andy Good from the Penobscot River Restoration Project, and I just would like some opportunity in here to share that information.
Okay, yeah, why don't we?
That's part of the funding sources.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, we can put it there. Doesn't
Yep.
really have anything to do with funding, but
Okay.
good enough.
Yeah, well, we'll do that. We'll,
Okay.
we'll stick it there, and just when we get to that, you
Sure.
chime in. All right. So, any other adjustments? Minutes?
I'm taking minutes these days. And I think this is my last week to take minutes, or who's taking it next week? Nobody. There's no meeting next week. Oh, our next meeting.
As far as I know, I mean, we'll see what the select board has to say. I guess I can cover that.
As I was kidding, I was joking.
You're not.
I say a joke, Don, a joke.
You would think after all your years, you'd be able to pick up on some humor and not just be deadpan sarcastic. See if you had done that, you would laugh. That was all right. So, do I have a motion on the minutes?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All in favor?
Yep.
Thank you all very much. All right. Well, now we're in funding source.
Well, what I wanted to share is that I had been under the understanding that the Howland Dam was not a success and that the town of Howland was going to have to pay to make those repairs.
Who'd you talk to?
Andy Good
With,
at the Penobscot River Restoration Project.
okay, thank you.
He was the guy that was at the library when they did the presentation on that Seed of Something book they did on that project. Anyway, I think the place that we got that information is that indeed some part of NOAA felt that fish were hanging around below the dam too long, but he actually disagreed with that. That project is now 9 years old. They view it as a huge success. They're very, very happy with the results. They have done 3 studies with smolts, with adult fish, and 1 other with the University of Maine. They have not had to fund all of those. They, in some cases, participate by providing some support, either with expertise or money. But all of those studies have been really successful. He also shared with me their cost to maintain that nature-like fishway or bypass. What he said is that in 10 years, they have only once had to remove a tree from that area,
Like that.
and that they have not yet, I mean, once in 9 years, they have not yet spent any money on maintenance. They have budgeted $50,000 to $150,000 once every 10 to 15 years if they need to move rocks or sediment. And I actually asked him, I said, well, you wouldn't have to move rocks or sediment in a natural river. Why do you have to do it in a nature-like fishway? And the answer was, because that's what the deal was with NOAA to get to do it. So it isn't that it's not a huge effort, and it's also not a huge expense. $5,000 a year. And that's budgeted, not spent. It's like accrued or amortized. So anyway, I wanted to share that because we have been under the impression that, oh, and the other thing is Howland doesn't own that dam. So Howland isn't gonna have to fix it,
Who owns the dam?
the Penobscot River Restoration Project. They would like to sell it to Howland, but, well, they sold the dam in Palermo to, those people for $1. So selling it doesn't necessarily mean they're looking to recoup money. It means they're looking to no longer have to incur $5,000, maybe $10,000 a year at most. He also did say that they are gonna have to do some ongoing monitoring of fish. But again, that is almost all that work in the state, not only there, is done with the University of Maine and not always all that expensive. So I wanted to share that because I felt we had been given misinformation and the fact that we pretty well discarded the Nature Like Fishway because we thought it was fraught with so many issues. I wanted to share the fact that the one closest to us is not.
Okay, thank you.
Can I say me
Sure,
first?
go right ahead.
I just, considering how things are all fraught with disinformation, do you know if the Howland Nature Like Fishway is holding an impoundment of water?
It is, there
Because
is still a
that
dam
might be a
there.
little bit of a,
No,
okay.
there is still a dam there.
Right, yeah.
So
because it
there
comes
is an
around.
This
impoundment.
is just the what the fish go.
I just wondered if that
Yeah.
might have added
Oh, and
what-
the other,
the difference.
and another just tidbit, I asked him, he said that fish get to, the Enfield intersection, I think, between the Penobscot and the Piscataquis. And 20 to 30% of the fish that get there decide to go up the Piscataquis. And that they currently think there's about 600 fish, depending on the year. Some years it's many more, some years it's less. But there's about 600 fish that get
Are
there.
going on our way.
And they do, I mean, when they built this, there's a shallow side and a deep side. So there's, depending on when the water is flowing, the fish can get up either way they want.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay, and who is Andy?
I don't know if he's the chairperson. I don't know what his title is, but I reached out to Miranda.
Good.
And number one said, do you still have a job? And number two, do you think you're gonna still have a job? And number three, what do you know about the Howland bypass?
Did you reach out to her this afternoon? So that that information on her having a job is current.
Was yesterday.
Pretty cool.
Actually, 2 days ago with Miranda. Anyway, she said I should talk to Andy Good. And I also called to talk to the town manager in Howland, and he said, you ought to talk to Andy Good.
Yep.
So I'm pretty sure Andy Good's the guy.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's good.
Well, I think the important summary of Sandy's findings is that, that sounds like they might be able to not have to re-engineer it. But the underlying principle that we were working underneath, which is that if in theory, if it's mandated if there is some sort of shortcoming, then it has to be fixed. It seems that Howland might have
No shortcoming.
no shortcoming, or not enough that anybody's willing to push it. Cause you sometimes find about that, which is one regulator looks at it and has an opinion that's a little bit more extreme than another. And so, whatever the case is, I'm glad for them that they don't have that problem. I will say,
Doesn't cost you any more to be optimistic, and
Yeah.
that sounded optimistic.
well, as a reminder though, the Nature Like Fishway, we discounted the real possibility of doing that mostly because of the physical cost. Yeah, the cost and the physical room we have to work with, because in our case, the people are trying to keep the impoundment, which is a limitation. We didn't have to keep the impoundment.
But
Yeah.
with one of the Nature Like Fishways, the impoundment was possible to be kept. That was part of it.
Yeah.
The dam could come out, the impoundment stays at, I can't remember, 75%. It was only 14 million
Actually,
to build it.
There were two options.
There were two variants.
Right, yeah.
One of them kept the
2% and 3%
Yeah,
grade.
so it's possible.
One dropped
Yeah.
the impoundment by 5 or 6 feet. That would be the 2% grade.
Correct, yeah, it's possible.
Okay, great.
And that was only $10 million, but I'm gonna say our $10 million for keeping the dam is what, Brian Howard reduced that by 40%. I mean, I took his piece and our estimate, so I'm saying,
Okay, well, now we're.
But
getting
anyway.
into- Yeah,
okay,
but, okay, so, we'll move on to the proposal from Gordon. I've, had a quick exchange of emails with Brian and apologize. We had a prior engagement. We couldn't make it tonight. But we have his proposal. And it's not really necessary for us to look it over because we're not going to be making the decision on any of this. Obviously, we all, we will vote on this later when we come up with the exact wording for our recommendations, but when we all find him to be credible and certainly the work that Gordon has done is top notch. So we've got no problems with that. And, so it wasn't just Joe Blow with a backhoe coming in here and giving us a quote. This was a respectable quote. We'll hand that off to the select board because it's nothing for us to do.
We should make a recommendation to the select board.
Yes.
And-
So
And what are we recommending?
So a good point. How do we want to go about formulating the list of recommendations? Do we want to do them going as we go, or do we want to wait until the very end and then just do them all at once?
I was thinking from a format standpoint, other than introducing the committee, first thing should be the conclusions right after that recommendation and then data after.
Sure.
Let's not keep it as, you don't want to keep it in suspense.
No, I meant for just tonight for
Oh.
agreeing to them.
Well, let's go through the topic.
Yep.
And at the end, I'll take notes, I promise. And then we'll just reorganize them.
Okay, then that's the format. We'll come up with,
Can I just
questions.
interrupt for 1 second about the Gordon contract and just our procurement process? It will have to go out for
Sure.
bid. So
Anything
just to make
over
that known that it's,
$500 or something,
yeah,
whatever it is,
5,000.
5,000, that's really low.
So at that point, we get the project engineer, they can come in and bid on the project.
Sure. There's,
Perfect, that's the way you do it.
Okay, so, well, just to dispose of this then, we're gonna recommend, subject to the procurement process, that, yeah, by all means, work with Klein Schmidt and give us some numbers, okay? If nothing else, the numbers that we have now are for feasibility purposes. We want to make sure they're a little bit high, okay? And, this would give us probably a reasonable expectation of a lower bound on what we think those costs are going to be. So I think it makes perfect sense to do this. And these are good guys on both sides.
Yeah. I would also say that as part of our recommendations, that we should, point out, remember our audience. The audience is the select board, but it's also the townspeople, because it will be posted on the website. We should also have something in there about how, although Brian's, I don't know how we would, the suggestion of what it would cost him to do it, it's within the ballpark of our estimate. And we want to, it's better for sure, but it's not like, you know, he can do it for $100,000 or something. I mean, it's still a million dollars.
Well, actually, I'm just silent on it. I just want to hear from them. And I'm not trying to prejudge where it's going to be or why it came about, but just love to hear from them.
Oh, yes, but in terms of our recommendation for the select board, I'm thinking it would be good to say this is within, this bid is within our expectations. It's not
Consistent.
yes, consistent with our findings.
Yeah, okay.
Because that comes in later when we say what our findings are. Okay, anything else on the Gordon contracting angle? Or?
maybe. Given what I learned yesterday, what would the chances be that we ask them to do it 2 ways? One, take the dam out and build a fishway, even at the lower level, the 2, whatever it was, and 2%. Because I think that a nature like Fishway has a bigger chance of finding funding than repairing the dam.
That's sure.
And so if this number is 10 million and the number that Interfluve came up with before for that lower level of impoundment, nature like Fishway, was 10.5 million. If Gordon Contracting's numbers came in similarly less than they did on this one piece of just fixing the dam, it's entirely possible that if we took an honest look at the potential for funding, it might be cheaper for us to do the Fishway than to take the route of repairing the dam and that existing Fishway. And I think it would be, since we're not supposed to leave any stone unturned, I think it would be fair to the people that voted to keep the dam to have an opportunity to look at both of those options.
Yes, Bill.
To that number that was in Interfood, you're gonna have to add inflation, you're gonna have to add project management oversight by the town, so you're adding another 2 million. If you're gonna do that, then we also, if we're gonna try and get apples to apples and make sure that we have a good representation, go back to my presentation in October, we also need to then look at them, if they can do a good job in reducing the cost, what is the cost to remove the dam? Now, because we're gonna have to look at it. I know nobody wants to talk about dam removal. I've been talking about it since day one, because the other option is do nothing.
That wasn't my squeak.
Wasn't your speak? Okay, go ahead and speak.
We would be getting way ahead of ourselves with either one of these discussions. You don't work with a contractor this early in the project.
Yeah.
It's just fast backwards.
Yeah.
Love those guys, and they'd be on the top of my bidder list. But, we don't have the scope for any of these things yet. And as far as and Sandy, your question on the nature like Fishway, yeah, I love the question. I think it ought to come up at some point, but not Monday.
Yeah.
Too soon.
And the other thing is that it is gonna go up bid, so we don't, it's not our purview to be making these kinds of calls anyway.
Too soon.
So, I mean, I could be like Sandy and just be confused as to, well, then why are we rushing into this if we still have so many options left? I mean, and the other option is there will be no funding at all, and we just do nothing. There's probably gonna be no perk anyway to finance at the moment, so
Well, the dam will
why are
fail
we kind of
eventually.
rushing? It was like rushing to the vote way back as well. We rushed because we thought we had to have it in for that election, and we thought we had to have their money, and we just thought it was the right thing to
But
do.
we're still under
And
the time.
we're rushing. It just seems like we're rushing
We're
still.
not rushing because we're according to the law,
Yeah.
we are in violation, we are behind.
Mhm.
And not by a few months, 10 years. And so we're not rushing. We've taken our time. And we have to go on the assumption that FERC will still exist, or at least the part of it that regulates us. There's no indication that that's going to change. And it could also be reconstituted again because there is no certainty apparently in government anymore. So we aren't rushing. We have to do this. What happens after our recommendation to the town, to the select board is not our purview.
To me, the process is, we know we're gonna have to deal with it. Now, either get a delay or else file that initial notice. Okay? And at this point, we're looking at the initial notice being that we intend to, getting ahead of ourselves tonight here, but we intend to not do power, so we're surrendering that license, but we intend to keep the dam.
Yeah.
Once we've done that, okay, then we get into exactly these discussions. How are we gonna keep the dam? And yeah, top of my list is, are there alternatives that nature like Fishway?
But does
Too
that
soon.
violate, if we said to FERC, we're gonna keep the dam, and then we went back and said, well, we're gonna take it out and do something different?
Yeah.
Does that, what does that do to us?
That's based upon the vote by voters then.
Well, not yet. I'm sorry, you're right.
If they don't approve of funding, you can tell FERC they're gonna keep it down, but
Well, let's assume they're gonna keep the funding. Shut up, Chris.
Yeah,
Let's assume that-
you needed to finish that because it sounded like you were telling John to do it.
Once, many years ago, I tried that on my wife.
It didn't work.
No, actually, I can say it. We finished our marriage. So, yeah, we would just, basically what I'm thinking of is getting FERC handled. But giving us the time, back to Emery's point, if we spent, not that I'll be alive then, but we spend the next year going through exactly the questions that you guys are raising about how do we keep the dam? It's okay. I think it's perfectly fair.
We have to do it anyway because we don't have a plan.
Well, the plan is the application for the formal application for a surrender, which is probably gonna take us a year if we get all the interveners as part of that application. So we have time to do this.
Yes. So at that end, what we should be doing, your notes, is that we need to put the submission recommendation right at the top of the list, which is that we are going to recommend that we surrender the FERC exemption. And how that plays out, that's what we're gonna have the FERC consultants for and the engineers. And because until we submit the plan, there's flexibility. But we have to start by at least saying that we're going to remove the dam. That we're not gonna pursue power and we're planning on removing the dam. I'm sorry, not removing the dam. And to the question about, well, what happens if we then decide to remove the dam? I don't think FERC cares as long as we surrender the exemption and we're on a path. I think weaving and bobbing will be all
We
right
have to
with that.
follow through the process based upon what the people voted. They voted first to
Yep.
not take the dam, so we have to follow through that process until that decision has to be made, whether or not the voters want to pay for it, and then I like your option, then we can figure out what Gordon wants to do officially. Maybe save us some money.
So I've personally spoken to FERC before in the last, meeting, for extension. And basically what they're gonna wanna hear is, A, are we gonna be surrendering the license, or are we gonna be keeping it? And B, we don't have to say dam removal or non-dam removal. All we can say, we want to keep the impoundment as what is stated in our statement, right? And then from there, that's how we can word that to them. And that kind of gives us wiggle room to whatever the engineer decides, or we decide, the town decide, does it go Nature Lake Spaceway? Does it go, keep the dam and fix it as is, that type of thing.
Okay.
So that would be a better way to present it to FERC at least.
Okay.
Wonderful.
And so we can put that in our recommendation to the town. Obviously, the town is going to be filing this paperwork and they're going to have expert advice on submitting the actual letter and not just firing off a couple
So
of
we have to
paragraphs.
be careful if it goes back to a vote, because we're interpreting that vote, what was said on the vote was to keep the impoundment, even though it did not specify keep the impoundment. She's saying, if that was the intent of the voters, then, you could probably keep the impoundment with or without
Well,
the dam.
it's okay because we're not saying, basically we're keeping it vague either to the FERC, not to us, but the FERC. We're just saying, no power, we're keeping the impoundment, vague. Get through the next process where we have the FERC consultants and we can firm up everything and then go from there. But for us, for our recommendation purposes, it should be that's what we should do.
We're all in agreement.
Yep.
Right, okay.
Okay. So moving to next part, we've got the report and recommendations. We have the Bill's presentation.
Our presentation.
Well, our
For me,
presentation
it's the
with-
mouth.
well, your name's on it, so.
I got that. Okay, well. I put together basically a cut up to keep just the key points and sent it out to the committee members, trying to limit it to 10 slides that have any meat. In looking at it, other than introducing who was on the committee and, the times we met, which is 30 seconds a slide for 2 years each slide, going in and stating conclusions and then recommendations. One slide with conclusions, other side, we don't even have conclusions, one slide with just recommendations. What are they? Well, number one, we've got, great, what are the others? And then subsequent material to be able to feed into why. The one being the electrical generation, that, and then the second one being, here's what we have for the initial costs based on the OPCCs without an engineered project. Here's where you have to go.
Basically what we did on the February 4th meeting in Central Hall.
That's all that is.
Okay.
Now it's just a matter of how many slides. I want to keep it to a minimum because we have 10 minutes, maybe 15 max for the select board.
Yeah.
So if you look, 10 slides with meat at 1 to 1.5 minutes a slide, you got 15 minutes. The others are just space limits.
Okay, so, I've looked through it.
But we need to modify the recommendation slide to include the stuff with, for the contracting.
I have no recommendation slide as of this point in time.
Okay,
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying, when I looked at it, I'm thinking, the next steps in the feet, like, we need, and that needs to be right up front, right after we introduce people into a basic introduction. Okay, do we have conclusions? Do we have, or do we just have recommendations? Give me the 10 recommendations, 1, 3, 4, 5, 10. Let's make words on it.
To Sandy's point, we came up or showing a number from our February 4th meeting of 10 million. And when we make this presentation next Monday, are we still using the number 10 million, or are we now introducing the notion of a range? At this point, we're hearing noises that between Kleinschmidt and Gordon, they can come in with what they think are less numbers, fewer numbers. But I don't know what that is.
Late as you do, sorry.
So I think it's fair to have Bill tack on the notion that again, these are feasibility numbers. We know they're high. We already are getting some incomes from folks, but they may be lower and perhaps make it up $2 million. So I think if we just put that phrase in, as it were, I think we're okay.
that would make me much more comfortable.
Yeah, okay. If we could do that.
Right, and also let's not forget that the $10 million piece is, and this is very tricky on how to word this. We're not going to take 10. If we did have to do the whole 10 million, we wouldn't be taking it from the tax base in the taxes, like all at once. It would be financed over a longer period of time. And that the financing number is pretty large all on its own. But then that one's the most variable of all the expenses, because if we do get funding for something, that number comes down. Because that's on the assumption that we're financing the whole thing. And if the contractor numbers are down, we get funding source for a piece of it, a funding source for a piece of that. So I've struggled with it. I don't really know how to explain to people what the financing charge is going to be, because it is so contingent upon what the cost is. Not only that, we might not bond it all at once, which, because if we know we only need, say, $2 million for the next 10 years, we're only going to bond out for $2 million. And then plan on bonding out the rest afterwards. And that just changes the whole actuarial table. Very complicated. And I honestly don't know how to present it to people. Chris?
I lived in Washington for 25 years. I used to go to these committee hearings with somebody would come in and they wanted some weapon system or whatever. And they lowball the damn thing. Oh yeah, let's do that. And then next thing you know, like F-35, they end up costing 8 times as much and they're 4 years late. Because the taxpayer don't want to do that. No. So I would think that when you guys go to the taxpayers and ask for money, you are in fact going to give us the worst case. No bait and switch here.
Yeah.
How you phrase the request, but transparent.
Yeah. Just in terms of agree, we have an estimate of what the high end of this will be, and therefore we have a pretty good idea of the timeline and when financing will start, what that is gonna cost. And I agree, we need to be aware of what the top end is, because in the end, it's gonna cost whatever it needs to cost. I just don't, when I've been explaining it to people, I've been saying, oh, well, and then there's also the financing piece on top. And it's been difficult for me to explain how that's even variable. Okay, so,
Can I ask you a question?
yes, sir.
2 minutes ago, you just said, oh, and it could be 10 years before we spend.
Just part of it. We know that we're not even gonna get started on shovel
Yeah.
this for probably 3 to 5 years.
Yes, but once it starts, it's not a stop and go. It's let's hang on and do a little more.
No, it might, that's the thing, is we don't know if the contractor says that we're not gonna be able to get to phase 3 for another 4 years.
Yeah.
We're not gonna go out and bond that money and start paying interest on having it just sit and,
Right.
Draw down when you need it.
yeah, draw down when you need it. But anyway,
Do we anticipate that we would be going to do the voters this June with any kind of number?
have to. So if we don't, then here's how it plays out from the municipal level. If we do not ask people for money in June and the amount is undetermined, we have nothing in the budget to do any of this work.
I understand that.
So we have to ask for some amount of money, because otherwise for the next year, no work can be done unless we call a special town meeting and have a supplementary budget item that gets put on the second half of the tax.
Okay, I guess let me ask the question in a different way, because I agree that there's very likely money that is needed this year for consultants and other things. But now I'm looking at Jordan Contracting, who came in and gave us a quote for a piece of the project. So, and it was less than our 10 million. And so now what I'm thinking is, or I guess what I'm asking is, do you anticipate that we would be going back to the voters in June and saying we need $500,000 this year for FERC consultants because we need to know whether or not you want to do a $10 million project? And that's what I'm asking. Are we going to be putting a $10 million number, or worse, a $16 million number on a ballot in June? Or are we going to be putting a number on a ballot in June to get us enough money to hire people to figure out all these variables and get these numbers from Jordan Contracting? That's my question.
That's up to the select board to determine, because there is 2 ways of going about it. You can say, well, here's what we need this year. We have to do the surrender letter. And so a surrender plan. So we know we're going to have to invest money into that. How much that is, we don't know.
Taxpayer. If we get N dollars for the next year, really the end point of those dollars is the surrender application, which is all that stuff we've been talking about. Okay? Haven't we implicitly, don't the taxpayers need to understand where that leads? As a taxpayer, I would think that I want to know, what are you getting me into?
Yeah. Sandy, we've talked about this before, but if we said to the taxpayers, we need $500,000 to figure this out, to keep the dam. We get that done, and then we say, all right, now we need, pick a number, 6 million to do the project. And they say, well, we don't want to do the project at 6 million. Well, we've just spent $500,000. That's our entire year's road budget. And that's irresponsible for us I'm speaking for myself as a select board member. I think it is absolutely irresponsible to spend money, that amount of money, on something speculative. Either everybody's got to be on board and say, we're fine with whatever the estimate is for the whole thing, and then we start spending towards that, or we find an alternative. But dribbling it out isn't gonna work because eventually there's going to be a big number. And that big number, whatever it is, and you can say 10 million down to 5 million, $5 million is still a huge amount of money. So hell, put it down to 2.5 million for the whole project, for everything. That is still a wildly huge number. And to ask people to take out of their pockets for that without understanding what the total cost is gonna be is just, it just should not be done.
Okay.
I'd be interested in what the rest of you guys think about that topic.
I've thought for the whole 8 or 10 months that we've been sitting here, that we were pretty much all with the understanding that we would present to the town, the board, but the town to get it. We need $300,000 or $400,000 or $500,000 this year just to get the ball rolling. And that was definitely was the way that we were going to move forward. There was no hiding that there's another 6 or 4 or 10 million to come, because that's all work in progress that we need to get through this year with the surrender and the lawyers and the engineers. That's what we need to start. And we don't need to borrow 10 this year,
Correct.
but we need to borrow 400,000 or to start that work so that we've got the money. And then what I was told was that needs to go to the public to be voted on. So it needs to go to the Budget Advisory Committee, which would be wonderful. And for them to approve that it comes to the select board, that, yep, we need 400 this year. But this is just the beginning. I thought everybody was kind of
No,
aware of that's where we're going, that we're not kidding anybody by, it's only going to cost 500,000 this year. And we said all along, once we start down this road, there's no backing out.
Right.
That's the scary rushing bit to me. That, okay,
I think the complicated part is that Gordon just did this, and we had not had a lot of meetings to kind of, digest what Gordon just did, so that's making it kind of complicated for decision making. Me personally, I don't know what to do because they just brought this into us. We gotta figure that out.
so Emery, to your point though, it's about how we inform the public. When they're going, if we only ask for 500, let's just say even $300,000 in this budget cycle, are we properly communicating to them what we think the ultimate cost is going to be before they make the decision about whether they want to invest an entire year's worth of road budget for consulting? Now, some of it is unavoidable. Because we have to do the surrender plan one way or another. I mean, there's a whole bunch of money that we're going to have to pay. But, how the select board, it's a debate that we haven't had yet as a body, how to get the money appropriated, because we don't have it. We don't have the money appropriated. And it's going to be in this fiscal year.
So does that mean that if the town comes back and vote, let's say number is 500,000, if the town comes back and votes for that 500,000 as part of the budget process this year, that it's implicit that they want to go through with the rest of the project?
We need it to be explicit.
Very good. That's explicit that it is. Or it is also explicit that if the townspeople come back and say no, that it means they don't want to do that.
How it's worded is, I mean, we've talked about this since the very first meeting.
Your problem,
Yeah.
actually.
It's the select board's problem to figure this out.
No,
okay.
I'm asking, that's why I'm asking, that's why I'm asking the question of you. What is the interpretation of that? I recognize you don't have the language in front of you.
So our committee's recommendation is simply limited to, this is how much we think it's gonna cost.
Yep.
And it's now the 4 bastards on the select board, us, 3 and 4 others, to then figure out what to do with that. So, but don't worry, you're still involved.
Bill, can I ask for a show of hand on these 2 points?
Yeah.
Point number 1, okay. When Bill does his presentation, the numbers that we have now are understood to be reasonably comfortably high numbers, and that there is a good possibility that they will come in significantly lower. I'm not.
Yeah.
Significantly. it depends on, well, I want to see this first, but knowing that's not it, but, that's at least a useful number. Several million is a number? That's a number?
I think that's reasonable.
Okay, so Bill comes up and he says, numbers we have, the best numbers we have at the moment, based on currently available information are $10 million, okay, 16 million with financing, and that we have some initial indications that actual cost may be significantly lower. By that I mean, Bill means, several million dollars.
I'm gonna pick a random number too.
Several million, okay, several million dollars. So the first thing I'm asking for hands on, with your permission, Steve, is, are we all okay with that? With that approach?
Yeah.
Mhm. Okay, are we all okay? Okay, next, okay.
Me too.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
okay,
all right, you have a quorum.
okay, well, we can circle back around to that, because I'm curious to hear what the reservation is.
Can we do that now?
Yeah.
Well, I know I'm the show tonight again, but I'm concerned, I get what you're saying in the sense that how you present this to the public. And if you come out and tell people 10 million bucks, I'm a taxpayer, I'm gonna be like, wow. But setting aside, I think I'm backing up to the question you brought up, is that how do you present it? We know we have to have a certain amount of money no matter what happens. You $500,000 to surrender the license or whatever number you want to pick. But if you also add on to that, say it's also going to cost us 10 million bucks or possibly 16 million bucks, people are going to back off of that and say, wow, I'm not sure we should spend the money. Versus we have to spend that first piece of the pie. And I think your point, Julie, you just say that we only have estimates right now. We need $500,000 to get into the ballpark.
That was my second question.
Yeah, okay.
The first one was that the initial estimates based on initial documentation are $10 million, 16 million with financing. That we have some initial indication that this number could be significantly less. And by significantly, we mean more than, or a couple of million or more, okay? That's Bill's presentation on cost. Are we all okay with that? Okay. And the point you raised, David, is really what we're going to get to in a minute with the second thing. Sorry. Okay. And Tracy? That's just to the select board, right? Yes, that's all we're saying to the select board. And you guys do whatever you want.
You got to sort out the details how you.
My biggest reservation here is we go to the voters with any amount of money, but we don't know, and the first guy isn't standing here saying, in 5 years, if you don't do nothing, we're gonna find you $1 million. We don't know any of that. That whole time, we haven't had one iota of what FERC will do if we keep the way it is. We can go to the voters with any amount of money, but we can't be truthful that they may not drop the hammer if we do not get money voted. The townspeople will ask that 100 times to you guys, and we still don't have an answer for that. But at some point, they're gonna do something. We can't let this go 25 years and then pay off. And we
The
gotta
dam will
know
really fall
if
apart,
it's there
too.
or not. Because then the voters will know, if we don't do this in 5 years, you're going to get fined. I think somebody's gotta find that out. Somehow, they've gotta say something.
Back in December, I put 7 motions in front of the board. One of them was related specifically to that. This group, not the board, and then I don't know whatever happened to that.
Well, it comes out of this, Don. In terms of what we do Monday night, do we also talk about the level of uncertainty with the FERC requirements? It's a completely different point, but what are your thoughts?
I do think we should be, and that's not necessarily a recommendation, that's more or less a piece of information.
Correct.
And that is that we've done the best that we can. It's always, whenever you encounter regulation, always going to be conditional. Some, as we were talking about earlier, sometimes the regulator is going to be hard-nosed about it, and other times they're going to be like, well, we'll let this slide and that slide, but not that. And there's no way to know until we get
Why don't we
into
just conclude that that comment, that reference.
That has to be, so people can have an open mind that, you know what, maybe if we don't spend $100,000 now, we're gonna drop the hammer $1 million 10 years.
What,
Fine.
one follow-up point to the, well, we know we have to spend a certain amount of money this year. That amount of money some amount of money has to be spent no matter what the conclusions of the dam's final disposition and the fishway and all of that. But there is a fork where at some point in that process, we're going to have to start taking commitment towards a particular, because we're going to have to get engineering studies. And unless we want to spend even more money, we can't have them do like 5 different scenarios. So we really need to go into this process with some pretty strong guidance for that.
But didn't Gordon Contracting's proposal include they would partner with the engineering firm and that would all be wrapped up together and paid as one bill at the end, instead of having to pay for all of that upfront?
That's correct, but again, no scope, no understanding of what the interviewers are gonna say to us. Lots of uncertainty as to what our requirements are gonna be. The track we're in is in order to get those answers so that we're sure, okay? We have to spend money to get to that point. And at this point, I think all we can say is, we know we're under some FERC pressure. We don't know quite what that means, but pressure. Number 2, we certainly are proceeding. Our committee is all working on assumption we're proceeding with keeping the dam, agreed.
Yeah.
Number 3, we don't think we want to do power. And number 4, that the next phase is for us to get the details that we need to really understand the application, including costs that we're going to present. We think that's going to take us a year. That's really where we're at. And right now, we need some number, which we'll get to in a few minutes, I presume. We need some money to get this started, understanding that that money is, an implication is that we're going to end up fixing the dam. That's going to cost us maybe 16 million or maybe 10 million, but there's a number there. That's where we're at. So
I mean, I think that's simple too. Really, it's to present to the board, we need some money to get started, and we have a lot of time in front of us to work out what we're going to do. And so it's not that complicated. We need the money, and that needs to go on the budget.
Yep. And the second question, Tracy, you have some reservations and you haven't spoken.
Only in that this is just gonna be to get started, to get these studies in. But how much does it cost to surrender a license to FERC?
A lot.
You need the application. And in order to get that application, you then, at that point, it takes us a year. At that point, you have come up with all the things that Kleinschmidt and Gordon are talking about. Plus, you have to wrap in all of the interveners. You better come in with a plan, our plan, that's pretty precise. And we're thinking, getting way ahead of ourselves at tonight's meeting, that we're gonna be looking for several $100,000 to get that plan in place, to get it done.
And you gotta spend the money to do it.
And we'll get it. Yep. And then of course, so, the second question is, as we mentioned to the select board, it's the select board's decision, but I think it's fair for us to have talked about it and maybe even hold our hands up or not, recommending to the select board that when they deal with this, they deal with it in the context of an understanding of what their likely overall end costs are going to be, i.e. whether it's 16 or 14, whatever the number is. Am I confusing everybody?
I think that jumps out as scaremongering again. And last time you bought a car, you didn't worry about what the final price was. It's going to be a $10 million cost. So if you start saying it'll end up being 16, half the town is going to say just trying to scare us. And
Those people that say, oh, I can get my my $80,000 truck for 80,000. And then they're like, well, look at that monthly payment.
Yeah,
And then maybe it was okay for the first 2 or 3 years. Then they get a pay cut or they get laid off. And now suddenly,
It costs money to borrow.
yeah,
Okay, so let's build this up. Let's build this up. Let's just say that we recommend to the select board that we need X amount of money, which we'll get to later, okay? And that X amount of money, in order to, is in expectation that we will get these repairs done at a cost of $10 million, pick a number, just whatever these guys end up getting. Are we in favor of making that statement in addition to the whatever we need for this next year? I say yes.
I'm gonna be the devil's advocate here because I think Emery's got a very valid point. We don't know. So I think to get there, you have to set aside the money to get things started. I think if you go to the town and say, you know, also we're estimating, this committee, we're estimating 10 to 16 million dollars. We don't know that. And I think it's too vague. And I don't know, you know, if somebody came to me and said that, man, I'd be saying, I know some Navy SEALs with some dynamite to take care of the problem right now. But you know, I think we have to be very cautious about how it's presented out there. I think what you said made me think about it. And I think the only thing you can do is go and say, we need 500,000, whatever it is to get it started, get a company to come in, or at least get somebody to tell us this is what requirements of the FERC surrender is, and this is the estimated cost of that, and then move on from there. I mean, I don't think we're committing anything. We know we're gonna have to spend that $500,000.
Mhm.
We know we have to spend that because that's the only way we're gonna get to the point where we can surrender the license. What's beyond that is
So
the twilight zone.
we're looking to try to get something in this year's budget, Steve, is that what we're trying to say?
we have to get something in there.
Even if it's not in the budget.
Historically speaking, most people don't even read the budget, and these budgets are passed overwhelmingly, so
Well, this would be,
it's not $10 million to borrow. I mean,
yeah, most likely would be a supplemental. It wouldn't be buried in with like a department cost. It would almost certainly be its own article.
That might be a little bit.
Yeah, and then again, that's up to the select board, and then also just you got to make sure that it's legal, because there are certain constraints about how you can and can't word things in the warrant. But I will say that one of our main tasks as a committee from the select board was to figure out how much this might cost, because the select board doesn't have a clue. That's why we're here. And so we need to be able to, we spent 8 months trying to figure out these numbers. The select board needs some guidance on that. What the select board does with that guidance.
I guess that's my question. Yeah, we could tell them this is what we're guesstimating, but it's up to you guys how you present to the town. But I'd be
Correct.
very cautious about how I throw it out there and say to the town on a referendum it's going to cost us X
Yeah,
number. Of dollars.
that's for the select board to
Right.
lose sleep over is how to word it. But our role is to give the select board the information that they need to be able to do that.
That makes good sense. All right, moving on.
So, so that was all number 2 under the legal work. So we definitely need to highlight to the select board that something that needs to be done. We'll figure out the wording at the end, of what we actually recommended that. And that really is also, I mean, the FERC consultant has been part of what we've just been discussing. Chris, unless there's something specific, separate from the legal work and.
No, the next question in my mind is, first of all, we all agree that the answer to David, your question really is the completed application for surrender. And that entails in turn that we have someone to guide us through the FERC process, the FERC consultant call it. Number 2, that we have these detailed engineering review. Okay, that probably includes scope. Number three, that we get, I think that's the exact language. We request to be a non-federal representative so we can, as part of that record, visit to the interveners as part of the application process.
To the federal,
Right. To the, well, all of the interveners, federal, you're right.
it's federal,
So,
federal and state.
that means that we're looking for money to do all of this and to, at the end, produce a formal request with all of this stuff including we've already talked to all these interveners. And, and it's gonna take about a year. And now the question is, what's that gonna cost? Let me give you one big caveat. Okay. You find our first representative, the consultant. The consultant says, oh, you can already use the work that was done by Interblue or not. We have to pass that gate. Worse yet, when we get to the engineering firm, who's going to give us the detail that we need for a lot of reasons, but including what we need for the application, they may have their own ideas about how much field work they're going to be doing. And it may or may not go beyond the scope of what Gomez and Sullivan gave us 2 years ago. Those are all uncertainties, okay? So they may come in and they say, oh, look, we'll do the engineering piece for $50,000. Or they come in and say, we're going to do it all over again. We're going to put our name on this. We don't know that at this point, and we won't know until we start talking with these people. Okay. What that means is, to my mind, we want to make sure that we have enough funds to carry us through to get that application prepared to the point where everybody, the engineer, the consultant, us, the town, not me, but is comfortable that it's going to pass. We don't know what that money is.
Pass muster with FERC.
Yes, of course. I'm sorry. Yes, of course. But we're probably talking $300,000 to $500,000. It may be $100,000, but we don't want to come back in December and say we're looking for another two because they went over.
But it's the same argument as the dam itself, which is you say to people, we only need 100, and then you come back and say, no, we're already into it. Now we need another 200. People should be rightly. I was trying to think of something clean, but agitated is a good term.
If you do a special town meeting, people are gonna come in and ask you, because you didn't tell us to.
It's far better to ask for more and spend less than it is to ask for less and then you have to spend more. And a lot of people don't understand how it works. If we borrow the money or we allocate the money from taxes, we don't use it, it goes back to the taxpayers in some way, shape, or form. So if we ask for $300,000 or $400,000 for the consulting and it only comes in at 2, but we raised 4, then the 200,000 we raised would offset next year's taxes, or would buy that fire truck that we would have had to ask for more money for. So we don't want to over ask, because we do want to get as close as possible, but we don't want to under.
Bill, what's your thought? How much they ask for?
Again, we don't know because we never went out to look for RFPs to be able to get an idea, or a fish study. Fish study could be 50,000 by tacking, or it could be 150, 200,000.
So the select board will, to answer that question, so we're only recommending, we don't have a PERC consultant to recommend, we haven't gotten a bid from any PERC consultant. All we can recommend is that we think the number might fall within inside of, this is to give the select board a ballpark. The select board will not have enough time to get feedback from a consultant before we have to finalize the budget. That's the problem. We're already right there. So
County does similar things with the undesignated fund balance. They'll put it in to offset taxes.
Mhm.
You have an issue like they need to use a couple $100,000 to take the undesignated fund balance, put it there. So you're right. If we don't use 500,000, goes right back in that budget, so we don't have to pay that next year's.
So
We use a range.
we need to use a range.
Yeah.
And 500 being, I think that's the high end. I'm just going to guess that 300, based on what we looked at, 300 is probably the low end. Even if it came in at 250, that's even better, but, just seems that nothing these days.
Are we all okay with that? The note takers go 300 to 500. Okay.
So, can I put my hand up again?
Fire away.
I understand the law. Well, no, I don't understand the law, but I understand what you're saying. I understand Bill saying in week 2, when I asked about Nature Like Fishway, that it was 14 million and a huge maintenance cost years, and we all agreed with that. But are we being fiscally irresponsible to suggest we borrow any money when really it could be that Atlantic Salmon come in and say, we will build you your Nature Like Fishway, and we will keep the impoundment, the dam will disappear, the sediment will be cleaned, and they'll do all the landscaping, we will do all that for you, and we'll handle all the FERC exemption, surrender, we will do everything for you. But we borrowed this money and we started the process by ourselves. When do we start talking to other people? Which leads me to the next point. A couple of times you've said, once this committee presents to the board, it's kind of done its work, you know, so how,
Because the
haven't we
board,
got 3 years in front of us or something?
Well, I'm expecting that the board will ask us to keep going,
Right.
but our initial mandate was to do exactly what we're doing, which is figure out what the options are, what they will cost, come back to the board with steps, with recommended steps. The select board is absolutely gonna need some assistance going forward. But when, I don't.
So I just, sorry,
Yeah, I'm right.
to finish I just had one little bit that was Atlantic Salmon and NOAA and whatever wasn't really in favor, apart from the cost, of the Nature Like Fishway because it didn't reduce flooding. Now, I know we don't care about flooding so much, but they really, that was part of their holdback. So they may still be very willing to come and do it, but they don't worry about flooding. Yes,
A couple of things.
I mean, sorry.
A couple of things. What we're talking about is 2 of 6 scenarios
Yeah,
as a result of their work. The one is fixing the dam, which we've been working on now. Second one is that question of a Nature Like Fishway. One, it's still a dam.
not with the Nature Like Fishway, the dam came out.
It is still a dam.
Yes, okay, yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay,
it is, I agree.
You've done it differently.
Yes, I agree.
2,
I hear you.
2, cost was an issue. 3, and the thing that struck me as a member of that first committee, was they were pretty clear that if you take the dam out, we can almost guarantee you that we'll do everything, including round up all the funds to make that happen. Okay? If you put a Nature Like Fishway in, you're just replacing one dam with another. We'll help you, but we're going to give you no guarantees. And we're probably not going to be real interested in going out and finding other funding besides us. It's just not interesting to them. Okay, so as a consequence, we found A, cost to be higher. Okay, and B, their relative unwillingness to continue to work with us through the process. Okay, scared me, frankly. So that was the problem. That said, hell yes, if we proceed with saving the dam, absolutely, we should be looking at that alternative. Okay, but
Hang on one second.
that was the history.
I'll see you.
Just on the grant standpoint of, well, for funding opportunities, I will say, and I've said this before, the Nature Like Fishway is your least competitive item. That's gonna be, and that's coming from NOAA, it's coming from other funding sources that provide money for these types of things. So not to discourage the nature life fishway, but just know that your chances comparatively in the grand scheme of things on a national competition level, you're gonna have a lot lower percentage of getting money or funding for that. Not to say that it won't happen, that you won't get some, but that is going to be an issue. And then thinking back when, I do remember, like Chris was saying, obviously dam removal, they will be 100% on board. And that's also something that NOAA stands by still today, as far as that. And obviously the nature like fishway part, I don't know if we can approach them the same thing with ASF and they'll be willing to write the grants, do the research, find the funding, as they said in the previous dam committee, basically because it's not meeting their requirements that they want. So it's not, yes, nature like fishway can happen, but it's probably going to be coming out of our pockets versus the funding sources, or at least a big chunk of it will be coming out of our pockets versus.
But still, that gets us way ahead of proceeding at all.
Yeah.
Which is really where we're at right now.
Yeah.
Bill, you have,
I don't want to distract, I respect your point, I don't want to distract off, but the key issue here in the previous work that was done, flooding. They cannot support, they being Atlantic Salmon, Nature Conservancy, NOAA, cannot support having a dam, if we do, they won't spend the money to keep an impoundment there, be it at 7-foot level or 12-foot level because of the flooding. If the flooding weren't an issue and we didn't have Army Corps of Engineers on top of it, looking at them and being one of the interveners that's going to be in the midst of all this, no problem. But with the potential for flooding, particularly at current level of impoundment at 11 to 12 feet or at the 7-foot at the 2% grade nature life fishway, we're not going to get it done. And from them, we're not going to get it. And that's why it's the flooding.
yeah, there's also another thing to consider when you look at, everybody's got limited pools of money. Dam for a nature like fishway, the existing dam has to be removed. So there's a cost to that. Now we're saying, on top of the cost of removing the dam, we're now going to put in a new structure. So from Atlantic Salmon standpoint, they're like, well, why would we want to pay for that? Just pay to remove the dam. That's what their fish passage is what they're looking for. Moving the dam fixes the fish passage. So they don't have, there's not much of an incentive for them to remove the dam and then put a very expensive structure back in place of that. So
Well, again, I would certainly recommend that when we proceed, because we'll proceed after this, that yeah, absolutely, we're gonna look at this. All those arguments that are raised,
Right.
pro and con, are way consumed. Yep, absolutely, it's on the agenda. Yep. So, we're looking for an expenditure of somewhere in the ballpark of $300,000 to $500,000, which does two things. One, it allows us to be able to submit to FERC the application for surrender, likely a year from now. And two, it finishes our obligation to come up with a plan, because that is the plan. Our expectation is that we'll continue on, and that we'll go until we get that thing done, the application. It's really where we're at, isn't it? At the end of the day,
We being,
the committee and what we need to say to the select board.
yeah, I mean, that pretty much, the select board will want to know what is that money supposed to do? What's the mileage we get out of it? What Chris said is very, very well.
I think that's it.
If we didn't spend it all on consultants, could we use some of it to answer these legal questions that we've been
that has to be a
floating around
part
for a
parcel
long
of it,
time?
yeah.
Okay.
Legal questions, potential for knowing what what studies, if any, we're gonna have to do, we don't necessarily have to start.
It's all in that bundle of $300,000 to $500,000 we're looking for.
Okay, so, let's see if Non-federal references. So one thing we didn't really touch on explicitly was the contact with the federal and state wildlife agencies. Communicating to the board that once we get ourselves a non-federal representative, we're able to have those conversations, and those conversations will hopefully give us some clarity on at least parts of the issues that we need to deal with.
It comes after we file that initial notice.
Yep. Okay, so we're taking care of item C. So now we're at discussions.
This meeting is next Monday,
It is this coming Monday. Yes.
and we still distribute amongst the committee, the presentation,
I already distributed. You had it.
but you didn't have a recommendation page.
We can make the recommendation page up and get that set, distribute that portion, that, the whole thing has to be given, but if you say to me, Bill, today, you're gonna get the presentation. The key parts of the presentation in terms of the 3 or 4 slides, I don't know what's on them.
Right.
Therefore, I'm not interested.
We can, what we can do is we can, tonight, in public, we can vote on what is going to be on the slides. The exact wording and punctuation, we can do that.
I can get that out tomorrow, the next
Yeah,
day,
and we can do that offline. We don't have to come back.
and get everybody's feedback.
Yeah, because unless we run into a situation where, well, we shouldn't, but unless there has to be the debate about the items, but if we agree to it tonight, I think we should just all be comfortable with working out the exact language. And we'll present that to the board.
Bill, what are those 3 slides that we need to fill in tonight?
Okay, but, Alcina, well, I'll just walk through. If I'm gonna start, and I realize you don't have it in front of you, but looking at getting the word across to try and have a cogent story that we're telling. What we've done, we start out with what our mission statement was, so everybody's clear on that. That's 30 seconds maximum. Who are the committee members, just to have it on the record, so it's there in public. Here are the committee activities that we've done, going through X number of days. Just a piece, and again, part of this is keeping it in the record, so if people in the future come back to see what happened.
This will be on the website. So we want
It's
to-
there, so people have it. Part of it is not so much for our communication there. And then accomplishments to date was basically taken from that. The next page is, do we have a conclusion page and a recommendation page? And if we have conclusion page, what's the conclusion? And then a recommendations page, we sort of talked about that, going back and forth. And that fit in with what I had further back in, which were next steps. And these next step page 1 and 2. So we have the recommendations, and then looking at next steps is part of an outgrowth of what we recommend.
You really don't even need a conclusion page, nothing's concluded, we're recommending.
Yeah, that's the conclusion. And I agree with you, but I'm bringing it.
Yeah,
That is a conclusion. That in itself is a
Yeah,
conclusion.
but the conclusion, the only conclusion that we've come to, when we came to it several meetings ago, several months ago, is that we are to surrender the exemption because power generation is not economically feasible.
So we'll make that number 1 recommendation.
That,
We don't have to have a conclusion per se, because I will have available what we talked about before, 2 pages essentially on power generation option conclusions. Got that. And then from there, and tax impact. And that really answers that. And then it comes down to what are we doing for remediation? I've got the pages there. Very limited amount. I just took the ones that were at that point. And I'm not going to cover much, if any of that. I want to have that fun.
You do need to, your very first conclusion needs to be that we've examined the power generation. We have a report we've examined. We don't believe that's feasible.
Yep.
Repeat it again in the recommendation.
Yes.
That voted down.
And what I'll do for that then is I'll have an appendix on, and I'll have those 4 or 5 pages, 3 or 4 pages related to power generation conclusions. So if somebody wants to look at it, it's there. Otherwise, we're not even going to present it.
Right. Conclusion number 1 is no power.
Well, you're right, we did have the report, so that is a good conclusion.
Okay, number 2, that, we believe, saving the dam is a multi-million-dollar project. Number three, that today we lots of uncertainty. About cost and time and who.
And even necessarily the actual option, as the standing point,
That's correct.
could be the nature of fish wedding. That's what people.
Or that everything points to a surrender application, which to do properly, you have your own words in it, may take up to a year. Up to a year. Again, a surrender application that we are pretty sure, very sure is going to get passed has included in it all those intervener discussions. Okay. So we will take time to sort through those things. Okay, those are our conclusions.
Oh, conclusion, okay.
Right, we okay? Now, as far as our recommendation is concerned, number one, we proceed. Agreed, we're all up for this. Number two, that we expect to prepare and submit a complete surrender application, which may take us a year.
The first recommendation is to communicate with FERC and ask for an extension. If we're gonna keep these in order, that would be the first order.
Yeah.
of business.
Okay, I think that's the second one. First one is we proceed.
Oh, yes, the first one is proceed.
Right, the second one is FERC notice or whatever is required. Number three is we see ourselves as continuing until we have prepared a reasonably complete surrender application, maybe a year. Three, we need funding. Simple. Specifically, 3 to 500,000. And we're asking you for, to make that available to us. Isn't that what we're looking to do? I feel I can't read the handwriting.
My first point, number one, proceed. Does that include communicating with FERC notice of surrender? Is that all one sentence?
That was the second.
Okay, so proceed. That's a verb. Okay, what's the direct object?
Dam
We
retention.
proceed with fulfilling our mission.
Dam
Very
retention.
first thing. We're on track. Nobody's in favor at this point of abandoning this.
To
Or
communicate with FERC notice of surrender.
that's the second thing.
Number three, committee will continue work until. we
Actually,
have-
on the number two, get an extension, and
Yeah,
number
we
three
do
was
need the
we're going
extension.
towards surrender.
Yeah.
So
We gotta get the full wording. Yeah, you're right. Three is the whole issue of committee continue work until we have a sort of complete surrender application.
Yeah, the surrender application, which we think may take up to a year. I think that's important.
And then four,
We are looking for funding to do this, and we think that's going to be somewhere between 3 and 500,000
for this coming year.
for this coming year. So give us the money so we can press on.
as long as, I just want to make sure from the select board as an action item, the filing of the extension is highlighted. That's something we can get on relatively soon. Yeah, we can get on that soon. We need to because June is coming up. So the weather this week is going to emphasize that.
And again, that extension, I think the technical term is the notice of surrender with the overview of decommissioning and retention of the thing, something like that, a couple pages, not big, I understand.
So even with the extension, we are going to say what we're intending to file.
Yes, that's correct.
You want to explicitly suggest to the town as a recommendation that as an interim immediate step, identified step, action point, which is to go out and hire somebody that can even help us get this started. I mean, we have the catch-all, we go
yes,
through the whole thing.
that's correct. At least to begin the search for our first representative, so then number 5 is, you guys do RFPs
Yes,
typically for.
yeah, again, because of the amount of money that's gonna be involved.
Okay, RFPs for, for whoever that is. And there's a number 6 then, that, we begin, with the legal work to answer the question, Phil's question.
Separate.
Yeah, so we can have those conversations with no money in hand.
Lawyers don't work for free.
Well,
So I heard.
going back to the first representative, okay? We could certainly have a list of them, and B, have some initial conversations so they can give us some ballparks as to what they think they might charge us.
Yeah.
That would help.
Immensely.
Yeah.
That's really key point.
We probably, I would say, there's probably enough money in the budget this year where we could at least pay a few bills to get the legal work started in the 2024, 25 budget that we're operating in now. And we don't have to, my understanding, and I could be wrong on this, we don't have to RFP getting legal advice.
Right.
We have to RFP if we're going to get a consultant. So the select board could authorize the town to move ahead with legal work pretty much right away, and we don't want to delay it. And that could be out of this year's budget. And then that would put us in a pretty good position for when we have our June town meeting and we have putting a dollar amount. Well, I don't know if we're going to be able to budget just so everybody knows that the timeline, the legal timeline we have to get the warrant ready is really, really short. We think, oh, June, that's many months away. Yeah, but it's got to be locked down and long before then. So, so a special recommendation to get that work started, the legal work started. Is a good idea.
Bill, can you wordsmith this stuff?
I'm gonna be spitballing it out. I expect everybody to come back, give input so we can get consistent with what the outcome is. This moving forward.
Yeah, so what I would like us to do now is we can go back over these points one by one, the higher level points. Well, I would like us to all be in agreement about the approach. And then we will all get the exact wording outside of this meeting. And then we confirm that up. And then that will be a matter of public record when we submit it on Monday. So there's no issues with transparency on that. I think the public needs to know how many times we change capital to a lowercase or put a comma in some place. Does that sound good? All right.
One more, do we need to include in our recommendations if they continue, entertaining whatever Gordon Contracting wants to look at? Or is
Oh,
that-
no, that's a good point. We won't be recommending Gordon's offer because it's not in our,
Right.
it's not in our purview to do that. And plus the town is gonna have to do an RFP on that, so it doesn't even matter. We could say, this is the best thing since sliced bread. And the town's still gonna say, well, we have to put out an RFP.
So after today, is our work done, or do you recommend to the board that this committee continue?
Absolutely.
I would say,
Recommendation?
We're just getting started.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean,
yeah,
it's a recommendation. 'cause
Yeah.
We didn't know the timeline this meeting was going to be.
right. What will likely happen is that the select board will ask the members of this committee to stay on for another sign up period. And
Until the application is prepared.
that's a good one.
And we're looking at a year.
The mayor and submit.
Yes.
I would have to look at actually the resolution that the board passed, the select board passed that formed this committee. My thinking, my recollection of it was to do what we've just done. So theoretically, the mandate is over. The need for this committee is not ended. Yeah. So, Chris, that would be another recommendation is to just formally re-up the committee.
Yes, well, recommendation number one is we proceed. And, and as part of that is re up the committee.
Okay, so that would be just specified in there.
Yeah.
Okay. Proceed is a little vague.
Proceed is very vague.
Well, actually, if you link it back to to our mission statement, which is to prepare the plan. And in all of this, we're saying that plan is the surrender application submitted to FERC. And we understand this, we're going to want it to be complete, and we understand that may take us up to a year.
Yeah.
So we want to keep on doing this.
Yeah.
In order to fulfill our mandate.
We allow the public to continue to be involved.
Oh, absolutely. That would be the same format. Okay, are we all, is there any other lingering things that we think might need to be put into this? Okay, Chris, what I would like to do is have you, I've taken my own notes, but if you could read, or Bill, whichever, Bill probably, because Bill's gonna be.
I'm gonna turn on my recorder, if I may, as we go through this, because I have my chicken scratching.
Yeah.
You got yours, he's got his.
Yeah.
And somehow I have to wordsmith this into something that's moldable that we have, and I don't have something that's there.
Okay, so what I would like to do is have Chris read his notes. If anybody has any additions or clarifications, raise your hand, we'll get them done. When Chris concludes his list, we'd like to see us all vote on having that be what Bill starts wordsmithing. And then that's what will go to the board. That way we don't have to convene another meeting between now and Monday.
Just get us a good outline, Bill, we can kind of.
Is that
I'm very good at getting the outline.
good?
so you get an outline.
Okay, Chris,
Conclusions.
fire away.
Conclusions, Bill. Number one. Can't swear now.
No, you can't switch.
Okay, you can do whatever you want. Okay. The first conclusion is that, we conclude that power generation is not. I can't read number two.
It's gonna be
Number one was
multi-million.
Proceed, and number two.
No,
was-
that's conclusion,
This is the
Oh.
conclusion.
Just the
recommendation.
That it's going to be in the multi-millions.
Yes, the project costs that we have today indicate this project will be a multi-million-dollar project. Number three. Great deal of uncertainty at this point as to cost and timing and scope. This is our conclusion. And recommendations, help me out, guys. My notes are failing me.
Well, we had written in conclusion, a surrender application being part of the conclusion, but could just go into the recommendation.
Recommendation. That we proceed towards submitting a complete surrender application to FERC. That includes dam repairs. Maybe that's simple, isn't it? Second recommendation is that, oh, and that may take a year. I think it's important to know that. Number
And
two,
my pet one though is that Bill for doing mention explicitly mentioned that we have to file an extension.
that's number two,
Well, that's okay.
number two.
Oh, okay.
That in the near term, we need to deal with FERC, likely by asking for an extension. If we're going to do an extension. Number three, and here's where my handwriting goes over.
In the meantime, town needs to deal with FERC by filing. What was
But that was number three.
We gotta try and get it down, because I wanna make sure I have it in that.
Yes, by filing an extension. Hopefully by filing an extension. Okay. Meanwhile, our next, number three, we continue to work to file a complete surrender application. Here again, a year, listen to this. That, number four, we begin the search for a FERC consultant. Okay.
A little picky, but doesn't searching for the consultant come before working towards submitting their final surrender? I'm just thinking
I'm being very,
logically.
very precise right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can always reorder, yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yes, because, sorry, we do want them to be in a kind of a logical, chronological.
Yeah, specifically, what we want to do is we want to get out and look for the FERC consultant. 6, I can't read this at all. 5, I'm sorry. Yes, we want to.
Sorry, did I miss you saying securing the funding of 300?
That should have been your funding.
Not quite there yet. 4 is funding. Well, that's my last thing, is to ask for money,
Okay. All right.
just to get it down to really fast. Okay, and then, we need to begin, legal work. Okay. Those are things we can do right away, and you guys can say yes, okay? And the last thing is, we are asking for funding to carry us through the application for surrender. We estimate at this point that it's likely to be $300,000 to $500,000. That is to get us to the point where we are submitting our surrender application.
We're also asking the board, based on public transparency, we continue our work, because the work still needs to be done through this process. Address things that we need to make decisions on.
Yeah, that is a recommended step. Re-upping the commission.
Everything should be pointed now towards that formal surrender application to FERC. not the notice that we're gonna do next week or next month, but the surrender application, which includes all the stuff we talked about, plus, they're gonna get into it, dealing with the interveners.
Speaking of which, don't we need to have request to be a non-federal representative on the list?
Yeah,
I
thank you.
mean, is there a cost to that, or is that just,
Legal
you
costs.
ask?
That's actually number 2, which is the deal with FERC. Hopefully, we can just have a conversation, Jack would just have a conversation, we put it off. They may ask, yeah, no,
Who? Yeah.
it's a job title. not a
It's
position.
Boy,
Well, her name is LC.
I'll put that in number 2.
Yeah, I gave a conversation, perhaps a formal notice of surrender, something like that. Okay. So that's where we are, I think. And if we do this, if we properly inform the select board of what we've done, where we're at, and what we want. If we give the select board, not you guys necessarily, but select board, enough information so that they can chew on this properly. B, I believe, but I hope you guys agree, that our request for funds is appropriate. Yeah. And they understand what we're getting into.
Yeah.
Okay, and what you guys do with that's up to you.
exactly.
So from a presentation standpoint, I'm just gonna have that introductory stuff. I'm gonna have conclusion, recommendation as an appendix. If for any reason I'm gonna put in the power, an appendix, I'm gonna put in our costing stuff that we have, and appendix funding sources.
Yep.
That'll be there just as part of the record, but I'm not gonna talk about it.
Correct.
To keep that under 10 minutes.
Yep. Well, no, that sounds great. And, our meeting that we had at the beginning of the month, or last month, has all of that. And that's already available. So but it's good to have this all in one spot.
That's key. Thank you for agreeing to re-up the committee. Not that I like just being on there, but having a separate, committee meetings where people can still be updated, because, your board meetings don't have so much time to do that.
Oh, yeah.
We have a meeting, we
There's
get
no question about it.
information, and we don't have to meet as often unless we get some information. Then we have these forums for a couple hours to do that. So
Yep.
John, mind you, that re-upping the committee may mean that eventually your son is on the committee.
Only answer now, you never know, right?
All right, so we've all heard the list, the items on the list. We've all, had our input. We're all set with that? So,
Once you see the final copy and the quick.
correct. So we're all in agreement that, I'll entertain a motion, but what I'm looking for is that we're okay with these items being on the recommendation list. Bill will wordsmith them. We will get drafts. We will have input into T's and I's and everything else that needs to be done. That will go before the select board on Monday. And, so I'm looking for a motion that sounds something.
Motion to, approve the conclusions and proposals to be forwarded to, Bill,
To build a forward to the committee members for
for a formal presentation.
Yes. And again,
All
I
the,
second
all the
it.
wording is in there,
I
but
second.
for formal.
Yes, okay, so we have a first and moved and seconded. Is there any more discussion about this? All in favor? Great.
Otherwise, I will give, you'll basically get 2 copies. One, you'll get the first word draft, something from me. Then you'll get a second. So probably tomorrow evening, look at your email.
Yeah.
Should be there by 5 o'clock, so you can look at it, get commentary back. I'll put out a second one, trying to incorporate everybody's, needs,
New one.
and then come back out and say, hey,
And keep in mind that this isn't 100% exactly the way every one of us wants it to be worded. It's okay. Nothing is being decided by the select board on that night, as far as I know. I think we're likely to have to
On
have
the
some
committee,
discussion about it.
committee part.
Yeah. Oh, so,
You know, this is you guys.
yeah, this is a shit. All right, is there any other? Yep. I don't think we should schedule our next meeting.
Great to hear.
Yeah, until we hear what's gonna happen, then we'll the select board will get back to us all. And then we can get there for that. Okay,
Formally approve, re-upping.
Yeah. all right. Are we all set with internal? Okay, open session.
So as this $500,000 hits our property taxes eventually, will it hit in 1 year? Or are you gonna spread it out over 3 to 5 years?
This consulting money we would assume it would all be spent in 1 year.
I'm not asking how it's spent, I'm asking how it's collected. Or is our mill rate going up just for the next year to cover that $500,000? Or is it gonna be spread out over 3 to 5?
Yeah, we can't answer that.
Well, for you and the town.
There's two options. One is to raise it all right out of the taxes and just kind of, rip the Band-Aid off, get it over and done with. It's the least expensive option because we don't have to pay anybody interest on that money. The other option is to seek payment terms or something with the consultant to pay it over, a couple years. And then somebody might be willing to do that, to spread it at least into 2 fiscal years. Into 3, probably not, but because they would probably be working fairly close to the end of the fiscal year, they might not be such a big deal for them to wait a couple of months to get into the next cycle.
So you have less control over the situation,
With,
how it's collected.
oh no, we have absolute control, it's just we have option. Us. This.
No, not you as us, but as a town council, you don't have many options in terms of how you collect that.
Correct. We don't have, we've tried to find the
Yeah,
magic
unless
money tree and we have not found it yet. So there's only, we also would definitely look to see if there's any grants or any other support, funding sources to help with the consulting. Because obviously if there's somebody willing to pay our bills, we're gonna want them to do that. But we don't know. We haven't gotten to that stage yet.
Thank you.
But I would say personally, borrowing money that you know that you're going to spend in that year and having it amortized over several years, from a fiscal standpoint, it's usually a bad idea. Because it's gonna wind up costing people more money. It might suck to have it all in 1 year though, so it's.
Talking a mill, all depends on how big it is.
Yep, exactly. Okay, Ed, thank you. Anybody else? Jake?
Yeah, I have some questions I'd like to ask. I'm a little confused about the difference between the dam and this impoundment. Am I to understand what you're talking about is the possibility of removing the dam and considering the remaining impoundment as the dam?
So we have interpreted the will of the people that they don't care so much about the big chunk of concrete holding the water back, that they care about the water level as it is, the banks being as they are, upstream being as it is. And if there's another option than keeping that big chunk of concrete there, as it is today, then that would satisfy what people ask for.
How did you determine that? You said you determined from the townspeople. How did you collect that information?
This was, go ahead.
In the first meeting when you were there as well, Jake, we spoke about keeping the dam. What does that really mean? And it seemed to be the general consensus that nobody cares about the lump of concrete in the middle of town. If there's another option to keep the water level from the cove up to the academy or starting at the dam around to the cove to keep the water level the same height, then that's the impoundment. We determined that we thought the town wants the impoundment, not so much the lump of concrete.
I don't want to be argumentative, but if you're saying that the few people that were there at that meeting represent the town, then you might be in trouble. The second piece of it is the resolution we voted on. the wording of that resolution, maybe somebody has a copy, was A, to keep the dam and pay, and the taxpayers would be subject to all the costs involved, or remove the dam. It wasn't a lump of concrete or a big slab or something, it was the dam. The townspeople voted to keep the dam, which also meant they were gonna be responsible for the cost. So they've already accepted a cost, even though they don't have it. All of us, we don't really have an idea of what it is gonna cost. But we have voted and approved by the town, and I don't know how you deviate from that when the majority of the taxpayers, the townspeople voted
They,
to
so
do that.
Jake, the way it works from a legal standpoint, we have to have an item on the agenda, on the ballot, that actually commits that amount of money, whatever it is, to be raised from taxes or finance. That hasn't been done.
I understand that. I
So-
understand the process you're going through.
Yeah,
The other thing I'm kind of amazed at, we had a man here at the last meeting that made a number of points, and I understand the RFP and the requirements, all that stuff. But he actually said, I will give you a contract, we'll sign it tonight, to do repair work within the scope of the work that FERC has already designated must be done. They have pictures, it's in the August 2023 letter to the town, detailing all that has to be done with pictures, engineers, and all that. And it also states that this work must be done irregardless of what future changes the townspeople make in this whole dam procedure.
Yep.
Is that true?
yeah, I mean, he made a proposal, it's just that the town, we're not the town, we can't vote on that, we're just a committee.
I understand.
And, the town is legally obligated to put it out to bid.
Yeah, I understand that too.
But-
But in fact, the town has voted with money, with cost. FERC has told us what to do. So there's no authorization needed, they've already told us.
That's what I'm saying is we haven't raised the money from the town. There is nothing legally binding in that, in
Mhm.
what we voted on to allocate money. That has to still be done.
But Gordon contract, he said, I will delay payment until 2027. So, and he would provide all the engineering, whatever was involved in what we're talking about needs to be done, collect costs. He would do that for a fixed price of, I don't know what it was, 2.3 or something. We have that in hand. What was the other thing? Oh, his letter to you folks that went through the select board. No, I think you all got a copy of that. Aside from what he presented that night, now he's willing to do a full scope with all costs paid, no requirement for the town to do anything. No engineering, no engineers need to be hired, nothing. And he wants 4 to 6 weeks if he partners with Fine Smith to provide you that information. Is that true? Is that what you understood even?
It's the basic gist of his offer, yes.
So if we in fact asked for an extension of a minimum 4 to 6 weeks, put out an RFP in the meantime, I don't know how long that takes, but I'm sure it's already here, enlighten us on that.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be a much better path than the mystery of all of this and you folks trying to trying to accomplish something that's, I don't know, we're just picking numbers, 100,000, 300,000,
If-
whatever. And as a townsperson, I guess I'll leave it.
So the short answer is if we were further back in the budget cycle, if this was say 4 or 5 months ago, that would be the obvious thing to do. But we don't have 4 to 6 weeks to even get that going because of the steps to get the budget ready for the June ballot. It's actually April meeting. We don't have that time. So this gets back to a point that we raised at the very beginning of the meeting, that Sandy had asked about, was about the timing of all this. If we do not ask for money in this fiscal budget, the 25-26 budget, then we're going to have at some point in the year, a special town meeting, or presumably just that particular item if we need to raise money, because we don't have it in the budget as it is now.
See, wouldn't it be a much better option to have a number on paper with a signature, even if we had to have a special election and.
It very well could be. That's not for us to decide. That's for the select board to decide.
I think the issue is if you want that, you gotta show up at the board meeting with the board members and say, that's your ask, but they look at it. I mean, we can't say that. We only can go and say, we have to surrender. We're planning on surrendering our recommendation is we surrender. There's no hydro and we need to proceed. And it's up to the town, the townspeople to go to the board and say, can we do it this way? And then the board has to make that decision.
I think I see I've been thinking about this for a second, what you're saying about the impoundment, because if on the resolution, it wasn't implied that it's a concrete structure. Legally, the dam, to me, it's damming up water, whether that's a concrete structure there or a nature-like fish patches. If it's not specified in that resolution that it was a concrete structure, legally speaking, there's wiggle room to consider, well, it is a dam, not necessarily the structure.
If I remember the ballot question is, can you authorize spending up to $8 million to take the dam out? And the answer was no.
Keep the dam.
The no is this specifically. I'm going to read it again like we did previously.
Okay.
A no vote means the town will need to fund studies, permitting, and repair construction costs of the Mayo Mill Dam using local tax. Repair construction costs alone are initially estimated at $7.5 to $8 million to fix the dam in compliance with FERC regulations for dam safety and fish passage, with additional funding needed for annual dam maintenance and compliance costs. This is because federal inspection of the Mayo Mill Dam has shown a significant safety concerns.
What was the ballot question itself?
The ballot question, the yes vote was for the previous. A yes vote means the town authorizes the select board to remove the Mayo Mill Dam and develop a riverfront restoration plan without using local taxes by entering into an agreement with Atlantic Salmon Federation and the Nature Conservancies. Others may be beneficial to secure grants or other non-local tax sources. The availability of grants and other non-local taxpayer funding is time sensitive, which is why the select board recommends a yes vote.
Okay.
Now, blah, 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 blah. So a no vote was not talking about an impoundment. The no vote was talking about the dam structure and fixing it. And I beg to differ with you respectfully. This whole issue about the impoundment is what people voted for. That came up about 3 meetings ago. We did not talk about that in the first meeting back in August or September. So we may have, but this is what the no vote was.
Yeah.
Well, if we look at our mission statement,
And the mission
our
statement.
mission statement does in fact refer to. The point is that, as far as I'm concerned, Jake, we're going to ask the select board for us to proceed to get a application into FERC to fix the dam.
Okay.
And a big piece of this, in fact, is going to be not a firm quote, because that violates the rules. But a big piece of this is gonna be the information we get from Gordon/Kleinschmidt. There's no argument there.
I know that we're all in agreement, pretty much in agreement with what's gonna be done. The other thing is, and I'll shut up after this, and in Brian's outline here, where he sent it to the selectmen and passed it around, a couple of points. One of them is concerned the fishway. Brian took the time to call the marine biologist in the Piscataqua County, who's responsible for our fishways. And, Peter Ruchenese. And he also gave Brian another name in NOAA as a fishways patches engineer, something or other. Both of them recommended, agreed that the existing fishway is repairable. Not mandated by FERC that they know of, that be removed. Is that, do you agree with that? That statement of it?
We'll speak. Certainly agree that was in his letter.
Pardon?
Certainly agree that was in his letter,
Yeah,
okay? Certainly that would be the preferred outcome, because we're talking $3 million there. But absolutely, it depends on FERC and the interveners.
and
And-
who is called for,
Can I finish? Can I finish?
who is asked for? Or here's that plan for,
We don't have a plan. See,
you do.
see, that's the,
Can I
that's the,
finish?
we
Can
don't
I
have a
finish?
plan.
Okay.
Was this depends on FERC. And again, the process is when we file the application to FERC is when we get all of the interveners, whoever they may be. We listed 15 of them in February, including those two definitely. And they're the ones collectively under FERC's umbrella to determine that in fact, not that it's repairable, I'm sure it is, but that it meets the fish pasture standards. That's not up to us. We try it because it's going to save us $3 million, but if we don't get our application approved, then we're back to square one and likely maybe spending $3 million. We don't have a choice.
Chris, I think the main thing that might help you, Jake, is that FERC can't give us an answer. They cannot give us an answer because they haven't checked with all the interveners. That's why this process takes a year to work through. So it's not up to a single bureaucrat sitting at a desk in the FERC office. That person has no authority to tell us one way or another on this. Because they are obligated by law to get the interveners together to find out what their objections are, what their recommendations are, and it's only after that process that FERC comes to us and says, this is the conclusions that FERC has come to. So there isn't an easy way. Now, what was in Brian's letter was he talked to some people who have knowledge and experience, and they had an opinion that maybe we could get away with this thing being fixed and not replaced, which is the expensive option. For all we know, that could be the case, but there's no guarantee. The people that Brian talked to can make no guarantees, and there's nobody at FERC that can make that guarantee at this point. So, does that answer your question? It would be great if we could just go and, get on the phone and say, here's our engineering studies, here's the pictures, you can come down and take a look at it. Can you tell us whether this passes muster or not? And they can't do that. That's the unfortunate thing
At this point.
at this point.
I know I got 3 minutes here. Talking brought up the Howland Dam and the pipe.
Yeah.
Howland kept the dam, the town voted to keep the dam, so in fact, they do have a dam, and they do have a bypass.
Correct.
They don't have to take the dam out to put in a bypass.
It's a fishway, it's,
Unfortunately, in their case, they had a lot of real estate
Right.
beside the dam.
yeah.
And that was the difference. We don't have anywhere to come around the dam and come back in below it. They took down an old tannery to do that.
Yeah, take out Bill's apartment. and
Yeah.
you do that. I don't think Bill would be too thrilled with that.
Get rid of the mill.
Actually, no, you can put it in, but you just have to take out the existing dam and put it in the river that's there, take out all the sediment that's in that area and re
Yes, but Jake was asking, keeping the dam and having the bypass, and we don't have the real estate to
Yeah.
do that. I mean,
The
We
by,
could-
the bypass becomes a fishway of some sort if the
Right.
deal doesn't work.
We could make Route 7 into the bypass.
that would solve the flooding problem.
It would solve the flooding problem. Alcina, did you have something to add?
No, I was just gonna, what Sandy touched
Okay.
on,
Excellent.
they, Scott River is a lot wider than the Scotticus, and that's why they had that extra space to do the bypass around, where they tore down the tannery.
Okay. Jake, are you all set now?
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Steve?
Yeah, I have a kind of request. I've written something up, but it takes 2 minutes and 56 seconds to read it.
We'll time you.
So I need to hand you copies of it, and you guys can read it, because I do have other questions that follow on the spur conversation.
I move we give Steve extra time.
Who tells us we need a FERC consultant? Who said we need one?
I just been spending the last half an hour kind of listening and reading, and everything I've seen, they all say you cannot deal with this on your own. They said you have to have legal representation. It clearly, I went to multiple sites and they all say, don't try to tackle it on your own because you're going to run into trouble.
To surrender or to relicense?
No, to surrender.
Yeah.
They're saying it's a very complex, I mean, I could sit here,
So
take
has
more
anybody
than
talked to
3
any
minutes
FERC
to read
consultant
all
in
the,
state?
but they're basically saying you're out of your mind if you try to tackle FERC without legal representation and engineers who are familiar with the surrender process is what they're saying.
So has anybody talked to any FERC consultant?
No.
No.
Well, that's what we're talking.
That's what the recommendation.
Well, the
for-
question is, where's the $500,000? You have no idea. I mean,
We,
you're asking
very
a
true.
placeholder, you're spending
We-
$400,000 on roads, you're asking for $500,000 on a placeholder, there's nothing to validate it.
well, we were told that a surrender, we were saying that the,
Relicense.
just relicense is running about $1 million.
Million to a million.
Million to $1.5 million.
I'm familiar with relicensing, because I work for the power company, we relicense a lot of dams.
Yeah.
So I understand.
And what was the
FERC
cost
stuff
of
with that.
relicensing?
Relicensing,
Yeah,
Yeah.
what was the
So-
cost though?
oh, I don't know, this was years ago, it was a lot of money.
Right.
Yeah, he said these days, so.
But
Steve,
this is a
I-
relicense, we're talking about bringing a dam, repairing a dam back into compliance for, I mean, the whole problem the town has isn't the dam. The problem is the FERC license. We push it down the road for 10 years or
Right.
whatever. So that's all we've got to solve is the FERC license. And it
and
involves
all the issues that go.
all the other
with-
stuff. I mean, I know the first committee brought in removal because that was their guiding light. They wanted to see the dam out. But in reality, the problem the town has is for license,
Yeah,
period.
which is why we're recommending to get rid of it. Unfortunately,
But I would make, I mean, I think you're gonna have trouble finding one in the state of Maine. There's
What's
maybe
that?
one or two.
they don't need to be in the state of Maine. It would be great if we found somebody that was local, because this is federal. So basically, anybody that's got experience doing this someplace else is going to be valid here.
But without that effort, I'm sorry, Steve, without that effort, how can you plug in a $500,000 placeholder?
So Steve, what would be a better number to put in?
I don't know what the number is. I'd make a call. I'd call TRC, I'd call Conchfit. I'd find some consultant that's somewhat familiar with what we've got and say, hey, this is what we're looking at. You got a price.
The validation comes from the fact that the voters voted no, that we have to fund that. That's,
Well, what Steve is saying is the number that we're asking for.
You don't have any basis for it.
Well, Steve, I made the point earlier that this could come in at a whole lot less, remember? That we may find that consultant's gonna charge us 10,000. We may find the engineering firm that's perfectly comfortable using Interflu's data. And instead of the 300,000, 500,000, it may come in 100,000. We don't know. But what we don't want to do, if we can avoid it, is ask for some number that we all, including you guys, agree, and then come back in 6 months and say, we're overshooting. That's all.
And to be clear, the engineering, this is also including engineering studies. This is not just somebody to guide us through.
And legal work.
And legal work. This is not just somebody to fill out paperwork.
So forget Brian's contract. He's opted to do the engineering and absorb that cost, right?
Agreed.
So that, you don't have, that's there. So I know you don't want to put it in your bailiwick, you want to give it to the select board because of the contract. You can put an RFP out for cost plus, you can put out a fixed price, you can do whatever. So if you put an RFP out a fixed price, see who goes after it, he might, maybe nobody else will. But I think you ought to assume some of his stuff in your numbers, because you're talking prices from Interflu, Gomez and Sullivan. You've got a contract of validation from consultant, and you're not put it in there. I mean, from Gordon Consulting, and you're not including it.
Steve, we don't have a contract from Kleinschmidt.
No, I know you don't.
We have a proposal to give us a contract, A, and B, we don't know what's gonna be in that contract.
Yeah, I know, I didn't.
So we don't know yet. Given that we're gonna go to the select board Monday night, without that knowledge, we could put this off for a couple months till we get that back and have a chance to look through it, in which case we miss the budget cycle.
Which is an option, and the select board will be the ones to make that decision, because we can do a special town meeting. But there's downsides to that.
Is it possible that you say to FERC, yeah, we're gonna surrender, but we need more time to prepare and put it off until we can put together?
Yeah, that's the extension that we're gonna ask.
Well, could we see if they would grant, well, I get what you're saying, because by the time they answer you, especially with what's going on in Washington right now.
Yeah. The phone might just ring off. Yeah.
Well, again, if we just have a conversation until lately, that's fine. We should be prepared for Sam saying to us, no, you guys really need to file a notice of surrender. Not a lot, but just tell us what you want to do. Then you become officially a non-federal representative, so you can, on the record, start talking to the agency. Okay. At that point, you're beginning to discuss with the interveners. You get the engineering firm. That's what takes the year to get the application. Our mission is to get that application in hand.
But can you say to FERC, I'm just throwing this out there because I'm trying to think this out, but can you say to FERC, we are going to surrender, but we need time to come up with the money to surrender?
That's
Can you give
exactly-
us, and what if they said, yeah, that's fine, take your time?
That's what they'll do.
Which
Once we file that notice,
Right.
is the next step is that application, and they're gonna give us the goals that year or whatever it takes to prepare.
Because what they're interested, they just want to know whether or not we're going to surrender the exemption or not. That's what
Actually,
they're-
right now, legally, they want to know what our plan is.
Yeah.
No way
No
that
plan.
we're going to do that. Sandy, you had a question?
Well, I was just gonna say, because Steve has the point, and it just seems logical, could we not modify our recommendation? I mean, those guys you guys, plus your colleagues, probably aren't gonna make a decision on $500,000 that night. And the recommendation not be that we fear it might be that much money, but can somebody make a couple of phone calls and get a better number? I mean, there's gotta be some sense of what a FERC consultant cost would be on a surrender license of this size. And I mean, I don't know if anybody will talk to me, but I'd make a couple of phone
Well, I
calls.
can-
John first.
Can you tell me what those downsides are for that special public meeting? I just want to know that, just so it's out in the.
So ideally, we go to the taxpayers and we say, for your own personal planning, here's how much money we're going to take out of your bank account in the next year. And have that all out on the table and have people make decisions about, well, okay, well, maybe we vote down, and this is the theory. They say no to a certain expenditure because there's too much being asked of them. they prefer one over another. So if we don't put this into the mix, they won't have that to weigh against all of the other options that the town is seeking funding for. If then 3, 4, 5 months later, we say, oh, yeah, well, we already passed the budget. We already asked you for everything. You're already upset. Your taxes went up. And even though we knew about this all the way back then, we're now going to ask you again to give us more money this year. That's knowing that we're in this process already, I could see people being upset about that. There's also the issue that gets raised about people don't like special town meetings because they feel that they happen at an off time, they don't know about them, they don't come, whatever. I don't necessarily agree with that. If it's posted, you know what it is. But there is a perception sometimes that the special town meetings are used to ram things through in the dark of night because it wasn't done at the regular voting time. So, however, the plus side of all of that is it does give us more time. It gives the town, not our call, gives the town a little bit more time to come up with a better number, one that's more solid, and to get that approved specifically based on firmer information.
And I understand the perception people have, including myself, that if it's in the budget, these pass 99% of the time, because you can look back, see how much of a margin they pass. There's gonna be that perception. We put it in the budget, oh, everybody's gonna pass it. If nobody reads it, well, that's a fact. There is that perception out there, and then there's a special meeting, so we have to figure out, the board, you guys have to figure out what's the best way to do it, not politically, but what's the best way, monetarily and otherwise.
Yeah.
Because, yes, if no budget's too fast, people don't look at it.
I may be wrong. My wife tells me I'm wrong all the time, but, you know, I think of this surrender plan. Now, maybe there's a template somewhere, I don't know. But I'm thinking we have all information of FERC's unsafe acts that we have to fix. No matter what we do, the surrender, whatever, we've got to cure these problems that FERC has outlined. So we've got to do that, right? I mean, no matter with the hydro, forget it. We got to do that. So why wouldn't we go to FERC with a plan and say, here's your inspection, here's what we found, here's what we're going to do, here's how we attempt to do it, here's our timeline, here's our schedule, here's our milestones, yes or no? Forget the interveners. You're never going to make an intervener happy. They'll come in sometime on the side. But this town ought to take a position to say,
Well,
we're going into this plan.
I got to stop you there. The
Okay.
interveners tell FERC, FERC tells us. So the interveners are not somebody that we can just ignore. That has to be.
I'm not saying ignore them, but you're going to FERC. You're answering FERC's problem. FERC is your problem. It's not the interveners.
No, it's the interveners. We go to,
You have to, what do you have to prove to them? I mean, what do you
We
have
go
to
to
sign
FERC.
off from them on?
FERC goes to the interveners.
Okay,
FERC
yeah,
then
I
comes
agree.
back to
Okay,
us.
so you open it up for comment.
But
So-
we go to FERC.
Yes.
Our
but it-
plan goes to FERC. It doesn't go to the interveners. It goes to FERC. It says, here's our surrender plan for the stuff, the problems you found on our hydro site, because FERC is an energy generator. They're really not a damn people. They're
Yep.
generation, the energy guys.
David, you have the answer to that.
So why can't we do that?
What was that?
You have the answer to that.
In what sense?
If you spent the time on that little thing next to you,
Yeah.
and that little thing, assuming it's not AI, is saying that we'd be nuts to do that. To go.
I can give you a concrete personal example. Anybody can file the paperwork for a visa. Your chances of getting a visa approved without going through legal representation is near zero. So yes, theoretically, we could do this on our own. Alcina could just type something up in Word and send it off. The chances of that going through are probably about zero. And so there's a difference between theoretically you can do it yourself and the reality. I did a visa for somebody. This was 15 years ago. I spent $10,000 of my own money on it. better well damn believe that if I didn't think that that was necessary, I would have just typed up the thing myself. But
But we put all this action on for 10 years, probably 18 years, actually. Somehow we have to put it down on print. We have to come up with a surrender plan and submit it. And
yes,
if we keep going down rabbit holes,
It's-
that we've
it's
got
not keep-
interveners, I mean, we'll never get there.
but this is the process, is what we've been talking about. We need to make a surrender application. We have to submit the surrender application, which would include all the stuff that you mentioned. But we aren't going to be the ones doing it all on our own, just typing it up in Word and stapling a few things and mailing it in. It's not that simple. And even if, and I'm saying this is just like with the visa thing. Sure, you look at the form, it looks simple. Just fill in the boxes, put a stamp on it, you're done. There are other things that happen. And David says that he's gone through this and found the information that is consistent with my experience with the federal government's paperwork.
Well, the plan we should have is a timeline, project schedule that says the end game is submit and approve, yada, 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 at FERC. And down through those steps, we need engineering approval, we need legal approval, we need whatever, interview. Somehow that'll be laid out in the schedule, so we have an end date.
Yeah, and that's what the consultant does.
That's what?
And that's what the consultant is there for. The consultant is there to make sure that we've got all of that stuff. We know what we're doing. We don't do that. We have no in-house expertise for this.
Make some phone calls. I don't care. Like I said, see, I'm probably wrong. I like action. I mean,
Yeah.
It frustrates me that we've gone
This,
down rabbit
this
holes.
is
we
action,
keep talking.
but we're doing action, and the action is to do it the correct way that is going to succeed. And that, we have been told by people in the process that this is a year.
Who?
Jack started.
The fish people or the dam people or the nature
Well, Pete,
conservancy? or-
I think we're undershooting, truthfully, because I've talked to some people. I actually talked to an engineering company by accident early on in October, who actually is very familiar with this dam. And their indication was the surrender process is arduous and it could take several years to surrender it. So the issue is, you're talking about legal fees and all this other stuff. I think you're talking, we're saying a year. We could be 2-3 years getting the application finished. You know,
I don't disagree with you.
based
I'm
on.
just saying,
But you seem doubtful. You seem to think that this is just slap something together, send it in, and it's done.
No, I mean, you're not gonna be happy with my reading, but I read.
That's okay.
My thing is, your mission statement was to create a plan, send a plan to the town to retain the dam, yada, yada, yada. I don't see a plan.
We don't have a plan.
Steve,
That-
What your mission was, to
Steve,
create a
Steve,
plan.
two things. Number one, the plan is the surrender application. That's the plan. One.
That's a goal.
No, that's the
That's
plan.
go, you're right, but that will be the plan. The goal, is that will be the plan. Okay? That's our mission statement. When we say we're gonna prepare the plan, we understand that to be the surrender application, complete and ready and filed with FERC. Number two, actions. Actions. I too like actions. I believe in actions.
Go ahead. No.
You were here while we talked about it.
But all we've done is
For
find out why
zero-
we can't submit it.
Can I
No
finish?
matter how we consider it, we can't.
No, we
Can I
considered
finish?
when to submit it.
Number two, for $0, we're asking the select board for $0 to do exactly what you just said, which is make those two calls. Number one, to get the legal work started. And number two, to find that for the consultant, okay? For $0, we can call those guys, we can get a list together, we can have initial conversations, and we can have a range of costs. That, you said you're gonna do that on your own. Well, that's our job. Well, his job, but we're asking to do that. So I think this is, no, I don't think, I'll state very definitively, this is action oriented. The difference is that we collect, I think I can speak for us, we collectively believe that this is gonna take longer and cost more money than you guys do at this point. So what we need to do is have that conversation with the select board and have them tell us what we need to be doing.
I don't think we've run the scope, of what it's gonna take to resolve FERC's issues, or to surrender. I'm not surrender, I mean, of the work, the scope of work to repair that dam and meet FERC requirements, I think we disagree on the scope. I can't tell you about the surrender application.
Right.
I haven't even looked at
My,
it.
my biggest concern is, yeah, I like what Gordon said. I think all that information is great and that might happen, but I think that you also have to build into the cost is the surrender, getting to that point where you can say to the contractor, you can start work. And that's where FERC and the interveners and everybody else are gonna toss their 2 cents in, and that's gonna drive the price up.
And I think that's where, I hate to say this, but where we should have been working on for a year. Worried about pricing the physical work, let's try to get the ability to do the work and do the application. Because that's all it's about, is resolving 18 years of non-compliance to FERC.
I agree. And in
Right.
18 years, and we're trying to solve it in how many months?
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. I think we're all on the same page. I think we're all, I think, but just different insights into it. And I think we'll all end up, I think it'll all work out, but I think it's how we get there. The biggest issue right now, though, is we have to come up with the money. But like you said, lawyers don't work for free. And even just to start having conversations, you've got to have some legal representation, and you're going to have some funding for that. Whether, I understand what you're saying, 300,000, 500,000, 100, 100,000. I mean,
$1 million.
yeah, I mean, it's,
But we don't know. And that's a fair thing. We don't know. It's gonna be more than zero.
and I agree with you. There are other dams that have been surrendered. How do we reach out and find out? I mean,
I just think,
I mean, Augusta, what they surrendered a dam not too long ago, but the question is,
that's all I just want to make the point. I think we kind of missed the mark.
Well, we were never in panel to do the submission to FERC. We were simply here to give recommendations to the town as to how to proceed. That is the plan, and that's what we've done.
Then we disagree on what a plan is, because giving recommendations.
Yes, we do, because we had a legal mandate from the select board, so we know what we're talking about. I'm sorry for getting a little testy,
No,
but
that's fine,
we've been over this.
because you're gonna hate what I read, so.
That's fine. But
we're all
the
big
thing is,
boys and girls here, we got
we have
our
been
big
sitting
boy
here,
pants on.
we've been sitting here researching it, doing it. We volunteered our time to do this. None of us want to keep this going any longer than it needs to. Okay, so none of us are interested in twiddling our fingers and just not getting anywhere. This is the process that we've gone through. I think we all have a fairly good and strong understanding of the variables that are in play, the costs that are involved, not specifically, but where their costs are and where the costs aren't. And we are going to make recommendations to the select board, because the select board as a body isn't aware of this, because we have been tasked with finding this information out. But it's not simple. I don't think anybody thinks it's simple, shouldn't think it's simple. This is a big deal. And we have only spent a couple of months on just trying to even figure out what we want to do. Because remember, before you have a plan, you have to agree on what the plan is going to be. And that is largely what we have been doing for this period of time. We've been spending a lot of time doing things like, well, maybe we could do a bypass down the stream and cut around Route 7 and go around the long way. We spent time on that.
Or even the energy issue, the hydro, whether we keep hydro or not.
Yes.
Because we can't submit a plan without having an idea of what we're going to do. And that means exploring options. And there is a lot of options out there, which that's what we've been here.
I think, so I can hear myself speak, sorry. I thought to repeat what Steve just said.
Which Steve? There's two Steves now. This one.
Yes,
Yeah.
my apologies.
State one.
Steve won.
It's a great name. That's okay.
Okay, Carl.
In any case, we were given an opportunity and organizations came in and said, here is your problem, we will do this for free. We didn't like the answer.
Correct.
And so now, after 18 years of deferred maintenance that we haven't done, we now have to eat the cost of that. So that's the first round. This is the first expense. We have to go through the FERC process. We have to hire those engineers. We have to hire those lawyers so that we can define the scope and move on to phase 2, which is collecting an RFP. We may get to the end of this first $500,000 and as a community turn around and say, what the hell were we thinking? Take it out down to the riverbed. Simply because the costs are going to be too high. That may be a solution, that may be a question that we have to answer then. Right now, we were offered the engineering studies for free and the FERC compliance for free, and we turned it down, and now we have to pay for it. The rest of the cost beyond the first $500,000, who knows what that's gonna be? I have no idea.
Yeah.
You don't know what that's gonna be. But we were offered it for free, we turned it down, and now we have to pay to find our own solution.
We should know what those costs are when we do the application, FERC application.
I don't think that's reasonable. I think we need to wait for the engineers. I mean, it's
Well,
great for us to
that's
be
part-
informed.
That's part of it.
Yeah,
That's
let me just say that that's part of it, is when, this is one reason why submitting this application is so complicated and onerous, is that should be an executable engineering plan. It's not just a, oh, well, we'll move it, or we'll put this in, or put this, it's gotta be spec'd out all the way through. So the engineering part is part of the process of submitting that surrender application.
Correct.
We didn't take it for free, so we still have to pay for it.
That was the second part of the budget item, or the thing we did. We're committed to spend $8 million. That's what the voters agreed to do. I'm okay with that in the sense of, we're here to figure out what it means to do that. So I'm okay with that.
Thank you.
We'll come back to you.
I just want to say thank you first for taxpayers who can't attend the meeting, that it's online and that the minutes are there. So we have the information. Oh, my name's Lori Chambers, sorry.
Laura Chambers, thank you.
Yes, this is the first time I've come, but I've been watching.
Okay.
And I just wanted to say that, I've heard people say, well, the town, all the taxpayers voted to fix the dam. Well, the people who showed up to vote voted to fix the dam. So I just wanted to say that. And then in addition to that, what was voted for was to fix the dam with a price tag of $7 to $8 million to be paid by the taxpayers. And now, from the information from PowerPoint and what's hearing tonight, and it may be adjusted down $1 million or $2 or whatever, but it was $16 million, over $16 million. And then there was the information put out there, what that's gonna cost the taxpayers of an increase. So, say the middle range of the $200,000 property, you're gonna pay $600 more per year. So over the course of 20 years, that would be $12,000 for that taxpayer. And I'm using the $200,000, 30 years financing would be $18,000. And that doesn't include the cost of the annual maintenance. That's just fixing. And that's, please correct me if I am wrong in anything I'm saying, because I'm just trying to understand this. So, and it certainly could be more than that if, say, inflation's higher than the 2.5% that's been projected. In light of the current economic conditions we're in, I think the 2.5% is be wishful thinking. And my understanding of the project is we have to go through, FERC has to get something from us because we're not in compliance, correct?
Yeah, we're supposed to have submitted an entire
A long
plan. No, this June.
June 3rd.
But that was an extension of an extension.
Yeah. I think
Oh,
that's what
okay.
they said.
Originally, a long time ago,
Yeah.
it should have been done. That's my understanding anyway.
Yes.
So, and I think that maybe this is the select board that I should be asking questions to, not you guys. But I think a lot of people can't afford that. Cannot afford that tax increase. Because we're already going to have increase in taxes in the mill rate, just from the cost of everything going up across the board in the town budget. So I think that when you had said, how do we present it to the taxpayers? We need all the information, not just I understand it's the $300,000 to $500,000 to look into this, etc. But I think that piece of originally when we voted for it, it was 7.5 to 8 million, and now it could be 16, and it could be more than that, which is my understanding. If people who are involved in this project disagree with the fishway, or you have to redo the fishway, all these other things. So it could be more than 16 million. Is that correct? It's a possibility?
So,
Or it could be less than
yeah,
16 million.
exactly.
It could go either way.
It could go either way. We have built in pretty much, I wouldn't say the worst case scenario, but we have built in a full rebuild of the fishway and some other things that are quite pricey. So we definitely have not approached this as let's go with the best case scenario.
We have a high confidence.
We have a high confidence that
A
this
realistic number.
Yeah.
How I understand.
and just to make sure we compare apples to apples. And I would say that this was a flaw in the original question that was put to people, was there was no financing element in there. That was simply for the engineering, not the financing. And the financing is unfortunately significant. And so we have sought to correct that by including the financing as part of that, because as you said, people want to know, well, how much is this going to cost me at the end of the day? Not how much did it cost to fix the dam. They want to know how much it will cost to get the dam fixed. And those are two separate questions. Ooh, I like that.
So I think the select board, I don't know if this is the place to say that, but I mean, I'll come Monday next week.
Yep.
But that's my concern. I understand this committee has done what it was asked to do as far as putting that recommendation next step for the select board. But I think that the select board needs to get more information to the taxpayers, because not everybody's following this online.
Yep.
To be honest with you.
Yep.
And someone had made a point of saying like, oh, we don't need all the money up front. We need 2 million, or maybe it's 5 million, and then maybe it's 6 million or whatever. But the bottom line is, if it's still gonna cost, I'm using 16 million, above 16 million, because that's what was in the information that I've been given previously. It's still gonna cost each taxpayer that much money. Whether it's 2 million, 6 million, 5 million, and it's 10 years for this, 20 for that, 30 for that, and then over the course of the time, it's still gonna cost that.
Three things. There were really three pieces in the June ballot that were missing. And that was one of them. But the other two is, one, those were in 2023 dollars. And the $10 million that we have on now includes inflation. So that's factored in. And the third thing is that the results of Dam Committee 1 that came to the $8 million did not include all the shepherding, i.e. the legal work, FERC consulting, the engineering, all that stuff that is now on the town. And so that has to be factored. That's how we got to the 10 million, and then you finance it 5% for 25 years. That's the extra 6 million. Is that clear?
I do understand that.
Okay.
Because it now is all inclusive of a realistic figure of what it's gonna cost the taxpayers.
The bottom,
I do
the
get
end,
that.
right. The bottom line, if you're here in town for 25 years, what is it gonna cost you? And yeah, so that's what we've been trying to do. And, hang on, Ed. You start.
In reading your public comment policy here, it says as speaker, we can have up to 3 minutes type of thing,
Yeah,
providing
we're
our
more informal.
speech is, purview to the subject matter. Well, this man here, I know, has prepared a hell of a lot here. And he said to you, I'd like to read this because it takes 2 minutes and 56 seconds. But I'd like to give my 3 minutes to Steve.
Oh,
So
sure.
he can read that to us. If we can keep everybody here. another
Steve, are your
3
vocal cords warmed
I've
up?
actually heard myself talk enough, to be honest with you.
Right there.
Steve, seriously.
I mean, I could read this, it's not pleasant.
Don't worry, we won't shoot you.
Do you want me to read it?
Please.
Yeah,
And I
please.
have copies if anybody wants them.
This is what discourse, this is what public
Could-
discourse is about.
could you
We
give-
should be able
could
to
you
sit and say what we gotta say.
You want copies?
Please, could you give us copies so we can listen?
And I have extras if anybody wants. An extra page, all right. Okay. Let me preface this first. Through my career, I've kind of been a problem solver, and I've been a person that's pretty positive and try to help. But I really don't like doing this, because it's putting me into judgment mode, which is not something I really want to do. But I really think it needs to be done so that this committee, before you reach a final conclusion, I think you need to see where I'm coming from, for whatever it's worth. So the current committee is formed to carry out the wishes of the taxpayers. A desire to have more members from the local public was addressed. I believe the makeup of this committee was still an error, as 30 to 60% of its members had demonstrated support to remove the dam. As a past project manager, my project team members all believed in the same end goal and would do whatever it takes to achieve it. There may have been different opinions on process or actions throughout the project work, but every team member knew what was considered a win. That cannot be said about this committee, as not all committee members see the same end goal or ever agreed on what a win is. Without total agreement, failure to achieve the wishes of the taxpayer will result. This committee approved a mission statement with a basic goal: present a plan for keeping the dam. The primary contents, I'm going to skip through some of this, you can read it later. Really what you do is you present scope, cost, schedule baselines. These baseline schedules include deliverables, milestones throughout the entire project timeline, and the drivers of a project are stay within budget and get it within the time frame. I believe you had zero budget when you started, but you spent some money in Klein Schmidt to validate Gomez and Sullivan numbers, along with having a plan, not having a plan ready for correct by the requested date, which I think is the end of June. So that's what I consider a failure. That's just me being a guy who says, you give me a project, I'm gonna get it done on time within budget. I assume the mission's goal was to retain the dam by developing a plan to repair its deficiencies and restore it back into FERC committee and compliance with the least cost impact to town taxpayers. To date, I believe the committee has not developed a plan of least cost, but has developed a worst case scenario with respect to price. I see this to be totally opposite and only serves to present uncertainty and a high price tag for the taxpayer. It feels as if the output of the committee is to make the price tag so high that it will scare the voters not to approve the required funding. This may bring dam removal back into discussion, which is not how the townspeople voted. I understand that Gordon Contracting is recently engaged and is trying to define a project scope that meets FERC requirements while minimizing the cost of compliance. I believe the fish statute is a key component in this effort. Since the FERC inspection noted its condition is satisfactory, I hope the focus is on a least cost repair solution. These actions are exactly what this committee should have been doing, not trying to restore support for dam removal. As a taxpayer, I request that future efforts and/or actions of this committee be coordinated with Gordon Contracting. This direction will eliminate financial uncertainty, risk to the town, and may accomplish what the taxpayers voted for.
Can I ask him a question? Is that allowed or not really?
You're gonna have to make a heading on.
Okay. Can you do that though? Go to a specific contractor and work with them? I'm just asking because I don't know.
You can
Without
work
the
with
town
anybody.
saying it's okay to do
You just
that?
can't make commitments and you can't do anything, but I would think any input, any information you can give, unless you have to pay them, then you have to get approval. I would think they could work with, Steve, you're the expert on who you can work with, but
That, we can talk to anybody
you
we
can talk
want.
to
It's
anybody,
just-
you can talk to me.
As soon as the meter starts running, we've got problems.
That's what we have.
Well,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
I just.
So my point is, I see it different probably than anybody sitting in here, and I don't see this as a committee, subcommittee issue. I see this as a project because it's that big and it's that important. And when you have a project, you take a lead, you set a schedule up, you put all the action items, and you all go in the same direction, and you never question why you're doing what you're doing, what are the options. You just don't do it.
So just to address the first issue about the makeup of the committee.
Mm-hmm.
I know I can speak for myself, and I my experience with everybody on here is that we have been 100% focused on the mission, which was what we were given by the townspeople. We have not talked about removing the dam. We have not talked about, we haven't explored any of the options for removing the dam, because that is not in our purview.
You had it on a report that showed a comparison for dam removal, that is a pricing option. Somewhere there's a PowerPoint or something, you had dam removal on one of the columns.
That's in October, because of the, point where the committee was at that point. I went and reviewed what the options were from the previous work. Because in particular, we were looking at repairing the dam, what was the cost of that? What was the cost of the fishway, which brought forth other fishway options from Sandy and other people, and then, Jake and others. And then we also looked at, here's just to keep a baseline, this is what it was costing to remove the dam. Because those were from the previous work, so we would have an established background.
Right.
But
There
the
has
number one thing.
been absolutely zero work done by this committee to look at options for removing the dam.
Correct.
I mean, 0.0.
I'm just saying, you had a comparison sheet that shouldn't even been talked about.
Steve, it
Actually, you
doesn't,
had one of your members up there
Steve,
that they said, I changed my mind.
we have spent so many hours on this. We have gone over, we have spent a lot of time exploring options. We have spent no time, zero, on having the dam removed.
If you say it's my opinion, Steve, I could be wrong.
You are wrong. And I'm saying this is
Oh,
a fact, this is a factual
Well,
statement.
well,
It's all been done out here in public.
Okay.
There's no backroom discussion. There's no backroom deal. There's nothing in this report that we're sending to the select board that says, oh, and by the way, here's how much it would cost to remove, or here are the options. None of that is in there. Not real or imagined. It's not in there. This committee was tasked with this determining what the steps would be to get, well, first of all, when we first started, it was an open question about hydro or not hydro. That had not been decided by anybody. That had to be looked at. It had to be examined. We asked the select board for money to ensure that we were working with good and solid facts. So before you establish a plan, you have to get your facts straight. That's what we've been doing. You can't establish a timeline, action items, who's going to be doing what, until you've got an idea of what you are going to do. That is what we were tasked with. So we can't have a plan if you don't know what the plan is. We have been tasked with figuring out what the scope of the plan is. The first and most important thing we did was to rule out hydropower, because it sends everything in two different directions. This was not something that we took lightly, because it's a once and done. If we do this, there will never be hydropower on that dam ever again. So we took the time, explored the options, we got the opinions that were needed, and that's where that sent us on to a new path. We've been following that path. We have arrived at where we need to be, which is the set of recommendations for the Board of Selectmen. There's no possible way that we could get in an application to FERC for surrender within the time frame that we had, even if we had started right at the very beginning without knowing what the hell we were going to do. It's just not feasible. And we know this because people in the industry have said it's going to take at least a year, if not more. We had less than a year from when the vote happened. So I understand that you have certain expectations, but they're unrealistic. We have been doing as much work as fast as we can, as responsibly as we can, to get this into the hands of the select board to then determine what to do with that information, because it's going to require some amount of money from the taxpayer, which has not been appropriated yet. That's where we are.
Can I say something? First of all, during this process, I did change my mind on how I feel personally, but personally, that doesn't affect anything, because where my opinion goes is in the ballot box. It doesn't matter if I now think we shouldn't have a dam. Where it matters is how I vote in the box, and nobody sees that. Personally, I'm not as smart as any of these people. These guys know more about policy, about engineering that I could ever know. And I voted not to remove the dam, not because I thought that was the best decision, but because I wanted a transparent process. My personal biases said that first committee worked with left-wing groups. That was my bias, my political bias. And now that I'm on here, I see a different process. Now, whether I want to move the dam or not, it's irrelevant. I want the people to have all the information they can to make the best decision possible. That's what I want. Whether that takes 5 years, I don't know. But I just want to be the most transparent process here. But my personal opinion, that's at the ballot box. Yeah. Despite the work we do here, even if I disagree with the work we do here, it only matters in the ballot box. But I want this process to be transparent, and it is. I think so. I don't know enough about a lot of these plans and things that these guys are talking about. Actually, most of the time, I just want it to be transparent. Lisa?
One of the nice things about local government is if you want to be a part of change or decision making, you can be. So I think the option to sit on this committee, which opens to anybody that wants to be on it. These meetings, I mean, your eyes glaze over, you guys have done the work, and it's really so cool, especially during these times, that people with different personal opinions can sit around a table and agree to work together with one goal. And that's what they've done. And I'm a little offended by your criticism of them. They have put so much time and energy into this, and they didn't all agree. But you know what? They did it. They did what the townspeople asked them to do, because the original committee, a lot of people, there was, as Sean said, distrust. But this is the committee that people wanted. These are the people that serve by choice. There's always an opportunity to serve in local government if you want to create change. So if you can't be part of the solution, don't be part of the problem.
I'm not offended by his opinion. I value
Well,
anybody's opinion, to be honest. I value Steve's opinion. But people like Steve know, I've been to board meetings a lot. Maybe not the last couple months, but I've been to board meetings a lot.
Okay, you've been here enough.
And I've been pushing for people to fill these rooms. And I can only push so much. But I want to be on this committee because I want to be part of this. And he put me on there because he see me in there recording the meetings, coming there, asking questions, whether they're nice or not. But I've been here. That's what I want to do. I wanted to invest in my town. And by doing so, I get on committees or I come into board meetings. That's how you invest in your town. You be part of the governing process, like she said. And you do that by you guys showing up here. So I'm not offended. I value everybody being here. And thank you for coming. Hopefully we get more people.
I just want to say, and I'm not offended at all. I think you and Jake and the other people who've been coming have been very helpful. And so, it's what's the old saying? The cliche is, I respectfully agree to disagree with you. And what you said, that's, you know,
That's why I said, I don't mean to pass judgment. It's just, I have this thing in my life, although I won't explain it, but you never say you wish you had. And I just want you to understand how I received some of the stuff I've seen. I have tried to help, by the way. This town, a lot of places. I've been to a lot of meetings. I've had to help outside this meeting to talk to people. So I have tried to help and I have engaged. So but that's okay.
Right. I respect that. I think I appreciate everybody's been coming to these meetings, and a lot of these spaces are very familiar over the last how many months. So
Matter of fact, I will probably leave this meeting. I was telling Jake, I will probably, since I'm retired at a time, I will probably research all I can find about perks, rendering applications, and try to help build you something that can help you. So I'm a consultant, and that's what I do, and I'll do it for nothing.
I would say that, I know I've said this in prior public meetings, the most frustrating thing for me about this whole process is that it doesn't have a straightforward checklist plan. And being able to just say, you weren't here when Brian was here, right?
No.
It was an eye opener for Brian, because he said, I don't understand. How could an engineering firm get the specs, build it to spec, have it be executed perfectly, and then be told that it needs to be removed? And we all looked at them and we all kind of laughed and we were like, yeah, we know. I mean, this is just the way it is. And, you know, and Sandy got up and brought in some new information that maybe Howland dodged a bullet in the end. But, you know, unfortunately, the regulatory, sword of Damocles is always hanging over because somebody could change the office and say, oh, well, now it's out of compliance. So anyway, it was a little, I found Brian's facial expressions to be rather funny because it's like, well, how can you run a business this way? I'm like, we know.
It's not a business.
It's not a business.
That's why it's government.
Yeah, that's why it's government.
That's government.
Steve,
Yes, Ed.
when does the extension of the extension from FERC expire and the town start getting fined because we don't have the application file?
Well, again, it would be great if there was just a checklist that we could go off of that. The answer to that is nobody knows. What we do know is that they have the authority to start really doing things to us, and they always have. I mean, theoretically, they could have started finding us the very first time that we missed our deadline. But
You've been communicating and filing extensions.
yes, so fortunately, what we have been told is that as long as they believe that we're not just haphazardly stringing them along, they're not really gonna sink their teeth into it. And we think we've got a very strong case to make that we're not just.
Was there a response from the last FERC extension that said it expired when?
June 30th, 2025.
June 30th. Thank you very much.
And just a recap for everybody, the reason why we haven't been in compliance and we haven't addressed this is because there was, up until very recently, there was a non-governmental entity that was going to restart hydro and was going to handle all of these expenses for us. That was Arnold Development. And so we didn't do anything because we didn't think we were going to be on the hook for it. Eventually, they just found that it was not financially feasible, and then they dropped it in our laps just last year. And so that's why we're where we're at with it.
Can we sue Arnold and get the mill back?
Yeah, that's not gonna happen.
Thank you for laughing with me.
Yeah.
Steve, do you believe that we can't do any repairs at the present time without another approval from FERC?
Okay, so my understanding of this, and I could be wrong, is sure, we could go ahead and authorize the repair to be done. That would be very foolish without them having already said that those were the right things to do based on current information. In other words, we could go and fix everything on the list that they gave us from years ago, and then them say, oh, well, that wasn't the list we really wanted. Here's the real list. Yeah.
This was August of 2023, and it was after the latest 5-year inspection.
Yep. And so there is a chance that we could just authorize and go through the RFP process, get a contractor in, have them do the work, go through the surrender application. We still have to do the surrender application.
Yeah.
And FERC could say, oh, you already did the work. It's great. Fine. Everybody's we checked with interveners. The interveners are fine. Everything's fine. Or they could say, nope, that's totally not fine. You're going to have to redo it to our specifications because the interveners have said it needs to be a certain way. So no work should be done on this until we have a sign off from FERC.
They would be no interveners, would they, Steve, if you're doing maintenance work?
No. We have to surrender the license. Surrendering the license triggers that.
Just this initial work, they said has to be done to repair the deterioration in the dam, to bring it up to the safety compliant.
Correct.
There's
But that
no
doesn't deal with
interveners.
But it doesn't, that's separate from surrender.
Tell me if I'm not right. The minute you surrender that license, a whole new process kicks in, and that's the problem. We could do it all under the current exemption that we have, but as soon as we say, well, we're not gonna produce hydro, and that's all they're interested in, because they wanna get their hands on, get it out of their hands and turn it over to the state or whoever, and, you know, make it our problem. But they have to, they're gonna turn around and say, okay, now you have to meet the EPA standards and the sediment issues and all this other crap gets thrown in there.
One more time, to get the terminology correct. We would file a notice of intention, of surrender with an overview of decommissioning of the power.
Right.
And the retention of the dam. That's a small document that puts them on notice that we're beginning the process of preparing the application. Okay. Now, in order to have the best success of getting the application approved, we will have, before submitting that application, have discussed with all the possible interveners, as well as getting the engineering done and the legal work done. So that's done. So we can go to FERC with that application and say, we've talked to everybody you're interested in. Okay, so here it is. That's what's going to take a year. So you start with a notice of surrender. Take that time. Then file the application to surrender with all these people having been talked to and the engineering and the scope and all that done. So that in theory, they will in practice still submit for comments. But hopefully all the comments that are going to come in are from people who've already been commenting, the interveners that is. Once they get all that themselves, then they either tell us, yes, go ahead, or much more likely, let's say, yes, you're approved to begin work, and they'll give us their additional condition. So we have a notice to file, which might be June 30th. Okay. We have the application a year later. Then we have the approval process, which might be weeks if everybody's been talked to and are comfortable. It could be 2 more years if there's issues. Are we all in agreement on that process? Everybody's comfortable?
Is it possible early on to be able to gather that list of interveners and say, and communicate to them, in 6 months, we would like your renderings and your EPA report so that we can go out and build an RFP?
Yeah, that's exactly what
And I think that's
exactly what we'd like to do. This
push
starts
that
with,
along.
this starts with us finding somebody who's done this before, the FERC consultants, which the day after the select board says, go ahead and do it, and it doesn't cost us any money, we ought to start looking for that person to do exactly that sort of thing. Technically, we file together with our notice a request to be a non-federal representative so that those conversations become part of the record. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. So just to go out and have a conversation with somebody doesn't obligate them in any way to be consistent with what they're telling us. It's just a question of how you do it. And we always want to be doing this under the helpful, knowledgeable, professional hand of somebody who knows what they're doing. That for a consultant.
Yeah, one of the other things that you want to, for a consultant for is that you have no idea how to push back on some of these things that might be pushed at us, because we don't know. Somebody with knowledge would say, oh, well, so-and-so, such and such clause way down here, buried in 6,000-page statute, says we could tell them to go pound sand. They can't tell us to do that. We would want a consultant to know when we could push back on certain requirements, because every one of those requirements is likely going to make the cost higher. And this room wouldn't know, the select board wouldn't know. So we need somebody who understands the legalities of it.
In some ways, it's not about legal precedent, because it's typically taken care of by an administrative law judge.
Yeah.
And in these instances, so it's just a decision and a policy that guides law and statute, as opposed to an official opinion.
Yeah.
Right. One of the things, picking that consultant is going to be really important. One of the first questions I want to ask of that consultant is, how often have you done this? How successful are you doing this? In other words, do you really know your stuff? One guy comes in and says, I'll do it for 10,000. The other guy says 100,000. I want to explore that gap.
Emery?
Mine is just probably a naive question in the eyes of some, but once we file, when can we sort of expect to demand that FERC comes up to us exactly? I mean, is it all through consultant and the guy in Washington, or can we start demanding that some FERC representative
We never demand.
is here?
We never demand.
But when do we actually get to have
We heard.
one-on-one?
We heard some estimates of 3-4 months before we'd hear back from them. something
Yeah,
like
and
that.
FERC doesn't necessarily, converse.
Right, that's
with
what
the
I
general
mean,
public. So the talks would be, yeah, so for instance, if I'm still here in June, right, and, or we
Better
file
still
or
be
what-
here in June.
What's that?
You better still be here
Well,
in June.
You never know. I could get an accident on the way home, hopefully not, but,
No, don't say that.
no,
No.
it's true, it's life, right? But, so the meeting would happen, a letter would be submitted with FERC. They would then probably request a Zoom call with town officials. Cause I was at the last one that we had for the extension. And I will caveat a little bit about the extension portion. They have been very, very gracious. And I know Jack has said as long as we continue to move along, that they will be okay. However, we have gotten a very long grace period at this point. So they literally could come back when we come before them at this next time and be like, okay, so you don't have a plan. I get that you're gonna surrender, but we might start fines. And not to say as to be scary, but that very well could happen because we've extended so many times now at this point. And we're not coming back with a full plan by their deadline that we said we were gonna have it by. So I wouldn't 100% say that yes, we will get an extension. I will never say 100% that that's ever gonna happen. But, just wanted to put that out there. So then you meet with FERC, explain the situation. Okay, we are planning to surrender the license. We are going to be hiring a consultant in order to take us through the surrendering plan, which is what they require. And hopefully they'll be satisfied with that answer. And at that point, then whoever we do hire through our RFQ process, that will then, they will be the ones that'll put the plan together, submit it to FERC. FERC will review. All the stakeholders will come together because it'll be a public comment period for all of them. So that's local, state, NGOs, you name it, gets to weigh in. And then at that point, like everyone was saying, it could go, the numbers could go up, the numbers could go down. Because think about it, people might be upset that we didn't go the route that they did, so they might have a lot of pushback on our plan, right? I mean, it's a very true possibility.
Absolutely.
And we need to be prepared for that. And, or people might be like, let's get this ball rolling, let's get it off our plate. I don't want to talk about this dam anymore, you know? And that's pretty much how the process will go. So, yep, plan will go through, Army Corps, you know, all the agencies, all the feds, state, and NGOs and all that will have an opportunity. And then they will all come to a consensus, bring it to us, say, here, this is what or we'll give it to FERC. FERC will then give it to us and say, hey, this is what we have now come to the conclusion as far as your plan is great, or we want to see X, Y, and Z done. And like, I forgot, I don't know who said what, I think maybe Steve was saying that we don't know all the legal aspects, all the legal in and outs of this. So this is where the consultant, the legal part comes in and hiring someone to do this because they know all these little minute little buried things or loopholes potentially that can get us out of spending X 10,000 extra dollars that we might not have to spend, right? Mm-hmm. So I see the point of wanting to repair the dam immediately and get those safety compliances in out of the way, but FERC can come back, all those stakeholders can come back and be like, Okay, good job, you did that. You wasted money though, because now we're gonna ask for X, Y, and Z. And
That's perfect. Can you put all that in writing? So it's all these action steps, and then we can put a schedule together and say, now we have a plan. We're gonna do this, we're gonna do this, it may take this long. I mean, just, that would be really great.
Thank you, Alcina.
hope that was a nice little.
It's now 8:30, which is, yeah, past people's bedtime. You're already usually in bed, so.
By about an hour.
Yep, so we got another opportunity for public comment will be at the select board meeting on Monday night. I thank everybody for coming and sharing your thoughts and asking your questions. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. All in favor?